Alrighty, finally played the Mega Man games. This is a series that's been on the backlog for a very long time. Never played any of the Mega Mans growing up, I just missed that series, no particular reason, I just never ended up getting any. And as I got older, my desire to play the Mega Man games wasn't like super duper strong, so it's just been one of those like, I'll get to it one day kind of things. And one day has finally come. I have now played through all of the classic mainline Mega Man games, pretty much all for the first time. I have played Mega Man 2 and for whatever reason Mega Man and Bass before, but outside of those, this was all my first experience, and those games I played so long ago that a lot of it was forgotten, so those were pretty fresh to me too. And now that I've played the whole Mega Man series, I want to talk about it, and I decided to do it all in one giant video because I don't really have that much to say about any individual Mega Man game because they're all pretty similar, so this will be a fun little tour through the whole series and my experience playing all the way from Mega Man 1 to 11 back to back and how I feel about the series as it evolves and changes and whatnot. And just for clarity, we're only talking about, like, mainline, core, run, jump, and shoot Mega Man games here. I'm not talking about any spin-offs, I'm not talking about no Mega Man Kart Racer, or the soccer, or whatever other crap. I'm just here to talk about the Mega Man-ass Mega Man games, and we're keeping it just to classic, original Mega Man. We'll talk about X and Zero and all those things another time, perhaps. But for now, let's get right into it, of course beginning with Mega Man 1, and I don't think I really even need to go into detail about what the Mega Man games are. If you've played video games, you know Mega Man. They are very simple 2D action platformers. You run, you jump, you shoot, you get through linear obstacle course levels, you fight a boss at the end, you get their power, and you go on to the next level, you use the boss's weaknesses against them, you move on to the Wily Castle and beat him at the end. Everyone knows how these games work, you don't need me to go over it. So I'm really just going to get into the nitty-gritty stuff, the nuts and bolts of how these games work, and my thoughts on them overall. And coming into Mega Man 1, while I haven't played this game for myself, I have heard from Mega Man fans that the first game is kind of on the rough side and a lot of people aren't the hugest fans of it. And yeah, I can definitely see why, because the game is fun. It's a good time, but it can also be really annoying. There's a lot of stuff, mostly just like the platforming setups in this game, that you're just like, man, this is such a pain in the ass. And of course, you know, it's the first game, so they're figuring stuff out, they're figuring out what a Mega Man game even is, and they're experimenting around with design ideas, so it's not as refined as, like, later entries in the series will get. But outside of that, it is pretty representative of what a Mega Man game is. They've figured out the formula and the foundation right from the beginning here, it's just the execution that they didn't 100% have down yet. As an example of this kind of rough and annoying design, I would point to Iceman's stage, because you got the part with the famous Mega Man disappearing blocks. And of course, you gotta take some time to learn the pattern, figure it out, and then do the platforming itself. A little time consuming, but it's fine. However, after several screens of navigating these blocks, you then have this big, like, auto-scroller section where you're on these moving platforms, and there are also enemies shooting projectiles at you. And again, that on its own is fine. The problem is that if you get hit here, you're probably gonna fall into the pit and die, and realize that the checkpoint is before that whole giant disappearing block section. And you're like, dude, what the fuck? I gotta do all of that again? Come on. And while that is certainly a problem with this game, honestly, it is the lesser of my criticisms for Mega Man 1. You know, it's an old game. Sometimes things get a little rough around the edges. I'm okay with that. Actually, my much bigger problems for Mega Man 1 come from the things that continue to be problems throughout the rest of the Mega Man series, because many of these problems stem from kind of the fundamental way that the Mega Man games are designed, which is quite a problem for me that I'll get into throughout this video. The big thing that I don't like about Mega Man at its core is that these are very much games of trial and error. It's baked directly into how they're supposed to be played, and to me, trial and error is not very fun or engaging or compelling gameplay. Now, to be clear, when I say trial and error, I don't mean that something is just difficult and it takes many tries, many attempts of you making mistakes and learning what you're doing wrong and then adjusting. I'm totally fine with that. That's just a game being hard, and I will happily throw myself at a difficult challenge in a game over and over and over as I learn and improve. I'm totally down for that. And there is a fair amount of that in Mega Man as well. But at the same time, there are a lot of things in these games that are explicitly designed to essentially punish first-time players for not already knowing what to do. And I think the reason Mega Man 1 is considered so rough by a lot of Mega Man fans is because this game is pretty egregious with that kind of stuff. For example, that whole Iceman section that I talked about where you gotta do all the blocks and then the floating platforms at the end, that section is a hell of a lot easier if you get the magnet beam first, allowing you to entirely circumvent all of the platforming in those sections. The problem is, I didn't have the magnet beam at that time because I didn't even know it existed. I only learned about the magnet beam when I got to the Wily Castle section of the game and came upon an impossible platforming challenge, and I had to just realize that I didn't have something that I needed to clear this screen. There's absolutely nothing indicating that you're going to need the magnet beam going into this level, so if you don't have it and you start it, you've already automatically made this level uncompletable. And, you know, I don't exactly think that's super good game design, I'll be honest. Because upon realizing that the level was impossible, I had to deliberately get a game over so I could go back to the level select screen so I could return to Electman stage and get the magnet beam. Fortunately, I did realize that that was probably what I needed because that was the only thing in the game that was like a unique, weird, standout thing the first time I played it that I saw, and I couldn't get it at the time. So I was like, okay, it's probably that. But why didn't I get the magnet beam the first time I played through the level? Well, one, again, I didn't even know it existed, and two, I didn't know that I would need Gutsman's power to get it. Nor did I know what that was or that it would be important. Had I known that, then I wouldn't have started with Electman stage, which I'm sure any experienced Mega Man fan is gonna go, oh, huge mistake, dude, and that's exactly it. There's no way for me to know that I'm making a mistake because nothing indicates what I should or should not be doing. I mistakenly assumed that if the game lets you pick any level in any order, then they're probably all of relatively equal difficulty and I can just pick whichever one. So I just went with Electman because I'm like, whatever, we'll do this guy first. Turns out that was the wrong move, not just because of the magnet beam, but also because Electman is way harder than any of the other robot masters in the game. You get in the fight and you're like, oh my god, dude, calm down, Jesus Christ! And after that, I was like, my god, these bosses are not kidding around, but then I fought Cutman afterward, and I'm like, oh, that was way easier, what the heck? And at this point, I do want to mention that I played through pretty much all of these Mega Man games using save states to circumvent lives. I didn't use them, like, mid-fight to, like, cheese it completely, but, you know, anytime I hit a checkpoint and I died, I would put a save state right there just so I don't have to worry about game overing and redoing a bunch of stuff, which I know does compromise the design of the game, more so in Mega Man than lots of other retro games, and I'll get into that. But I did it because I hate limited live systems. I find that they make games really boring because I get really tired of just replaying stuff that I've already played over and over and over because the game arbitrarily decided that I failed too many times and I have to re-earn the right to take on the challenge that is actually challenging me. And I'll tell you right now, if I had played through these Mega Man games using limited lives, I would have just stopped playing because I would have gotten bored. I mean, just fighting Electman here at the beginning, I died many, many times to him, and if I wasn't using save states, then I would have had to replay this level like 6 times just to beat him. And I would not have done that. I would have just stopped playing the game. However, this is where lives feed into the real design of Mega Man and how you're supposed to play these games. Clearly, that's not the experience you're meant to have. You're not supposed to just bash your head against the brick wall of a boss that's giving you a hard time here. Electman is tougher than the other bosses, and obviously the reaction the player is supposed to have is, okay, I'm gonna get his weakness to fight him. Let me go fight someone else that's easier, get that power, and now I can come back and beat him. And oh yeah, that magnet beam power-up, I need Gutsman for it, I can go get that too. The design here is clearly that you're supposed to explore the game and hit roadblocks of stuff that you can't handle yet, so you leave, you go somewhere else in the game to something you can handle, get power-ups, become more capable, and then you can come back to those tougher challenges when you're ready. I mean, that's what the whole robot weakness thing is all about, right? You beat this guy, you get his weakness, and then you use it on the next guy. These games can be pretty hard, so a big part of them is finding how to make them easier for yourself. And while on paper that's a fine design, I do still have a number of problems with it because ultimately it does still just boil down to trial and error. I essentially wasted my time doing a Lekman stage because I just so happened to randomly pick it first. Had I instead randomly picked Gutsman stage first, then I would not have been forced to replay a Lekman stage. And the whole boss weakness system, like, okay, let's say I was like, you know what, Lekman's too tough, let me get his weakness and then come back. How am I even supposed to know what his weakness is? Because sometimes in these games, there's a degree of logic to the weaknesses. You know, Fireman, Iceman, one of these guys is going to be weak to the other. But Electman is weak to Cutman in this game. And I don't really see any logic to that. Why is the electricity guy weak to the dude with scissors? It's just how it is. So from the player perspective, what is the process of figuring out Electman's weakness? Fight all the other guys and get their powers, then go back to Electman and just try stuff on him and see what does more damage. That actually became a really annoying part of these games for me as I would play through them, and every time you get to a new boss or you get to the boss rush refight, it's like, alright, let me just go down the list and hit him with every single thing until something does a decent amount of damage. I don't really find that especially fun. I'd call that troubleshooting. It's doing the same thing I would if I had a problem with my speakers. I go, is this it? No, try something else. Is this it? No, try something else. That's the same thing you do when you're playing Mega Man games. And this kind of trial and error design doesn't just exist in the systems of Mega Man, it also exists in the specific design of how a lot of the game is played. Like the bosses, a lot of their AI and the way you're supposed to fight them is built in the exact same way. Like this one boss here, you walk into the room and you see those Gutsman blocks, you're like, okay, Gutsman is his weakness, and you throw one at him and yup, it does a good amount of damage. Everything that the game is telling me right now, everything that's on the screen, every signaling method the game has is telling me that this is what I should be doing. So I then throw all the blocks at the boss, but silly me, this now makes many of the boss's attacks completely unavoidable, and I'm left to be the fool because I didn't already know that somehow. And this, for me, is something I'll talk about throughout the whole Mega Man series. It was this constant push and pull between the parts of Mega Man that are good and fun. You know, I like the core design, the gameplay, the platforming, fighting enemies, doing the bosses, the whole format here, it's all good. But then you have all these annoying things that you have to put up with throughout these games that keep getting in the way. You know, coming now to Mega Man after so many years of this being such a legendary franchise, it was not at all the same kind of experience I had with, say, the original Super Mario Bros. Or Legend of Zelda. Those are, of course, classic legendary games, but they don't hold the highest regard these days, as, you know, many future games in the series might be better in this way or that, whatever. But going back to them, I was like, wait, no, these are, excellent games. They're really well designed, really fun. That was not my experience with Mega Man. I came to these games, and I think they're fun. I think they're good, but I don't think they're great. I think they have too many problems like this. And unfortunately, Mega Man 1 is not an outlier here. It might be one of the weaker ones, but there are problems like this throughout the entire series, as well as other problems that I've yet to even talk about. But let's move on to Mega Man 2 now, because this game is a notable step up from Mega Man 1. It is a much better game. The overall core design, the platforming, the bosses, it's way better here than the first one, for sure. It's also notably easier than the first Mega Man, and some of that is because I picked what is labeled as the normal mode on the main menu, but it turns out that's actually easy. The normal difficulty is labeled hard because old games would lie to you sometimes like that. But it's also just the fact that the game is designed more easily, you know, the platforming setups, the bosses, they're not as tough. And also, you have the Metal Blade in this game, which is a ridiculously crazy, overpowered weapon that becomes your main tool throughout the game because it can shoot in 8 directions and uses very little ammunition. I found that's a thing in a number of the Mega Man games. You know, it's hard to come up with a lot of weapons that have different functions that are all unique and interesting and useful in their own different ways. Usually you find like one weapon that's just ridiculously good and you use that throughout most of the game. In the first game it was Electman's power, second here it's the Metal Blade, and I actually did know that because, like I said at the beginning, Mega Man 2 is one of the few games in the series that I have actually played before. And that's because many people consider this to be the best of like the classic NES Mega Mans or whatever. It's got a very good reputation. Personally, I don't really agree, but we'll get into that more when we get to some of the later games, but it is a good game, and I had a much better time with it than the first Mega Man. But there are still quite a lot of problems here, including some of that stuff where it's just trial and error and the game will just screw you over. A really big, infamous example of that being this one terrible, atrocious, horrifically badly designed boss in the Wily stages, where you need to use the crash power-up to destroy these laser things, but also you need to destroy the walls to get to the laser things, but you don't have enough ammo to destroy everything, so you have to strategically destroy the right walls and only what you absolutely need to. And if you screw up in any way, if you miss a shot, if you destroy something you didn't have to, you instantly fail the fight completely. And God forbid you walk into the fight already having used some of your crash ammo earlier because you didn't know this was going to be a thing, you can just walk into this fight with it being unwinnable. That's cool, right? Also, Mega Man 2 starts to introduce one of the most annoying things in all of Mega Man to me, when you drop from one screen to the other and there's just something there that'll just kill you that you have absolutely no way of knowing is going to be there or reacting to or anything, you're just dead. And while I'm complaining, I'm gonna be honest, there's gonna be a lot of complaining throughout this entire video, because I don't have that much to say about, like, the good aspects of Mega Man, because the core gameplay is so simple, but I do have quite a bit to say about all of the flaws and the issues in these games. Like, for example, Mega Man being one of the quintessential classic retro platformers, why does no one talk about how these games have utterly terrible controls? First things first, what is this? Why is this in the game? What is this little baby step you do? Anytime you start moving on the ground, before you actually start walking, Mega Man takes a tiny little step, and it is completely useless and very detrimental to being able to dodge or platform well, because you get this little hitch in your movement, and if you're trying to like rapidly go left and right to dodge things, then he stops every single time you change direction. And what's especially bad about that is like, okay, that's really bad and weird, but you can get used to it, but kind of not really, because it's not even consistent, because when you're in the air, there's no baby step or any equivalent. You instantly move exactly like how you would expect in a precision platformer like this. You can instantly move left and right, and it's super responsive when you're in the air, but not when you're on the ground, so now you have to adjust your muscle memory differently depending on whether you're walking or jumping. Why? I just don't understand. What is the point of this? It doesn't give the player any benefit or any tool or anything of any value. It's just awful. Can someone please make ROM hacks for these games that removes the baby step, because it's the worst? Another little micro annoyance in these games is whenever you pick up health or ammo and it's refilling your bars, the game freezes for that process for no reason and is actually very detrimental. Because what can happen is you're platforming along, killing the enemies as you go, and then you kill an enemy right before you're about to make a jump and they drop some health, messing up your timing and eating your jump input because you pressed it during the freeze that you didn't even know was going to happen, and then you fall off the pit to your death. All of these little annoyances force me to develop really bizarre strategies that I don't need in any other game like this. Like, when it comes to precise jumps over pits, I started just, like, jumping in place in the lead-up to the edge just so I could have more predictable control of how I would move. And anytime I would kill an enemy near jumps, I would be sure to, like, come to a stop, make sure the enemy's dead, make sure I picked up anything that may have dropped, and now I am ready to take on this single jump in front of me. You gotta be so careful in these games just to do the most basic of things, which some people could argue is adding depth and nuance to the games. I think it's really clunky. One of the other things about the Mega Man games that I don't really get on with too well is that, in some ways, the design of these games feel like they're at odds with themselves. And here I'm specifically talking about their resource system, I guess you could call it. Mega Man is both a game that wants you to get good at it, and also a game that wants you to cheat and circumvent the challenges. Because obviously this game's a platformer, it's an action game, it's a skill-based game, and in any kind of game like this, some of the most satisfaction comes from conquering the game's difficult challenges. You know, there's something that you're struggling with, you try and try and try, you learn, you get better, you overcome that challenge, and you're like, yeah, that was awesome, I'm super cool. And Mega Man, of course, does that kind of thing, but it also just says, or you could just win for free without having to put in any work. That's cool too. The whole boss weakness thing is one of the biggest examples of that, because like all the Robot Masters, they're designed that you can fight them with just the Mega Buster, because they might be the first thing that you fight. But once you have their weakness, a lot of these bosses you can kill effortlessly. They take so much damage, and sometimes they have special effects where they get like stunned, or it cuts off their attacks, and they basically can't even do anything. Which, at that point, all of the fun that's supposed to come from a boss fight kinda goes away. You know, the challenge, learning how the boss behaves, learning their patterns, learning an effective strategy, practicing, executing it all, finally beating them. The player is robbed of that experience if you just use their weakness and kill them instantly. Which is why I decided that when playing through all of these Mega Man games, when I do the initial fight with the bosses, I'm just gonna do it Buster only, and then when I do the boss rush, I'll use their weaknesses. And that worked out pretty okay for the most part. It required me to actually learn all of the fights and how to beat them, and I mostly had a good time with that. But I'm bringing this up now, talking about Mega Man 2, because this game also introduces E-Tanks, these pickups you can get throughout the stages that go into your inventory, and you can use them to fully heal yourself. And I'm not usually the biggest fan of stuff like this in games, because they're essentially get-out-of-jail-free cards, and similar to the robot weaknesses, they allow you to clear the game's challenges without having to actually clear the game's challenges. If you're fighting a boss for the first time and you don't really know what you're doing and you're taking a lot of damage and playing really sloppy, you can still win the fight by just using an E-Tank, which takes away the satisfaction of overcoming that challenge, developing your skill, learning how to beat the boss. With E-Tanks, you don't have to do that, and you could argue, well, it's your reward for getting the E-Tank in the first place, and yeah, but I'm not really into design choices where we reward players by taking away parts of the game for them. Yeah, that makes it so you can get through the game, but it's without engaging with the game. It's without doing the things that make the game fun to play. So a part of me didn't want to use E-Tanks while playing through Mega Man. Just be like, I don't need it. I'll just fight the boss just with the health bar they give me. Because if I ran out of E-Tanks, then I'd have to do that anyway. So that's like the default intended challenge, and I wanted to overcome those intended challenges. But then, you know, playing through these games and the way they're designed and how many problems they have and how unfair they can be, I was like, you know what, forget it. I'll take whatever advantages I can get. Now, while we're talking about resources and problems relating to them, I want to talk a little bit more about lives, because as I said, I played these games with save states to circumvent the lives, but I could only circumvent them in some ways, not others. You know, I'd put a save state when I hit a checkpoint, but I wouldn't know I actually hit a checkpoint until I died and respawned at one, so it did mean that I was still dying and losing lives over the course of the game, and eventually I would still run out of lives. So I did still have to pay attention to lives, still go for extra lives when I saw them. It was still worthwhile for me to do that, but it was also worthwhile for me to do something really stupid and bizarre from a player behavior perspective. This is a classic problem that you see in lots of games with live systems that aren't super well thought out and well designed, where you game over and you lose a bit of progress and they set you back somewhere and they give you like the default amount of lives, which in Mega Man is 2. The problem with that system is what happens if I'm below the starting amount of lives. What if I'm at 0 lives and I start a new level? You start with 0 lives, which means if I die a single time, I'm gonna game over and have to start the level over, which means that the objectively best thing for me to do to give myself the best chance of completing the level is to intentionally kill myself so I can get a game over and now start with more lives than I had before. This could be fixed if anytime you started a new level, the game sets you to 2 lives if you were below that, but you would also have to make it so the player doesn't lose lives if they die before hitting the first checkpoint, Because if I go into a level with 2 lives, die, and now I have 1 life and I have to keep going, then again, the objectively correct thing for me to do is to kill myself until I game over, so now I can take on the level with the full amount of lives. This is what I'm talking about when I say I don't like live systems, because a lot of them have a lot of holes like this that are poorly designed, and in general, I just think that the system of limited lives is very bad for encouraging the player to get good at the game and learn. I'll talk more about that later, but yeah, there's problems. There's problems with these systems. And to be clear, a lot of these problems that I'm talking about aren't specific to Mega Man 1 or 2. I'm just talking about them in these games because that's where they stood out the most to me. But a lot of this stuff applies to many Mega Man games. I'm just trying to spread out my criticism here, otherwise the Mega Man 1 section of this video would have been gigantic as I discussed every single little problem that exists in all of these games. And also, don't take it to mean that just because I have a lot of criticisms while talking about, like, Mega Man 2, for example, that means I have a lot of problems with this one specifically. Like I said, I do think this game is much better than Mega Man 1, and even Mega Man 1 I still think is a fun game. I just want to talk about all the problems and all the thoughts that I had while going through these games as a new player. Now we begin talking about Mega Man 3, which from what I've heard is one of the better Mega Man games. Like I always hear it's like, what's better, Mega Man 2 or Mega Man 3? So I was interested in this one, and after seeing the improvement from 1 to 2, I was hoping maybe we'd see a similar thing 2 to 3, but now having played Mega Man 3, while there are a number of things about 3 that I do like, and a lot of new stuff that I think is cool, I also did have a lot of problems with this one. I found myself getting pretty frustrated with it. One of the things that I do like about 3 is the introduction of the slide. I think this is a really good, simple little addition to the Mega Man formula. It lets you get around a little bit faster, gives you a little bit more to think about when it comes to dodging attacks and hazards. Like you could try to jump over the attack, but you could try to use the extra speed of the slide to avoid it that way, which one is better. It just gives you a little extra something to think about, which I appreciate, and they incorporate it into the level design pretty well. Whereas the other kind of new default ability here, I'm not as big into the Rush Coil, where you can summon Rush and then bounce off of him to get a really high jump. That's all fine, and that too is used in the level design decently enough. But my problem with that is they do take advantage of Rush Coil a lot, like you do need it for a number of things, and it just kind of takes too long because you gotta pull up the menu, switch to Rush Coil, put the menu down, and there's like a weird delay when using it, and then it summons him, you jump on him, bring up the menu again, switch back to whatever you were using before, and most of the time it ultimately just boils down to like do the thing. Like they don't usually use Rush Coil for like platforming a lot of times, it is just there's a ledge that's too high for you to get to, so use Rush Coil, and you just gotta go through this whole menuing process, and it's just kind of nothing. And this is kind of the problem I have with these original Mega Mans in general when it comes to, like, using the different weapons. It just takes too long, it's too clunky and too inconvenient. That's why I'm using the Buster most of the time when just going through the levels, because, like, it might be faster to kill an enemy using this weapon or that, but it takes too long to switch to the weapon that it ultimately is faster if I just use the Buster. It's just not worth the hassle. These games really should let you cycle through your weapons with, like, the select button on NES, and I think there are ROM hacks that let you do that, because as it is, they put all this work into making all these different weapons, and I just don't really bother to use most of them. Also, this is a minor thing, but I do want to point it out. At the edge of the screen, in whatever direction you're scrolling in this game, you get a lot of garbage, like sprite breaking stuff. This is a pretty common thing in NES games due to technical limitations, and I don't have a huge problem with it, but it is worth pointing out that the first 2 Mega Man games did not have this problem, and now we do. And, you'd kind of think that, like, as the series goes on, it would get more refined and more polished, but also they're kind of pushing the NES hardware more. These games, they get more ambitious, they get more complex, they get much nicer visuals as the series goes on, so it's understandable, but it is a little bit annoying. Though this game is noticeably less polished than the first 2 Mega Man games, because I started with Snake Man's stage, and what the heck was that? Why did he just get knocked off the platform for no reason, man? Did not make a good first impression for Mega Man 3, but it was quite representative of this game and what it's like and my overall feelings about it in the end. Because if we jump to the fight with Snake Man himself, this is one of the things that was starting to, like, really annoy me with these Mega Man games, and 3 was kind of like sort of a breaking point for me. I really don't like how these bosses work. First of all, and this is a common problem you see in a lot of older games, I hate the use of contact damage for these kinds of boss fights because it usually results in, like, the actual boss's attacks not even really mattering that much. Far more devastating than any kind of projectile that they might shoot at me is a guy just walking or jumping toward me. That is such a more difficult thing to deal with, and Snake Man here is a very good representation of that, where like he shoots his little snakes and they go over the ground or whatever, but like forget that, man, get away from me, Jesus Christ. And part of what makes this so annoying is a big part of the boss design in general in these Mega Man games. They are very unfair. There are so many, countless situations I find myself in where there's no way for me to properly make decisions about what to do because the bosses have so much unpredictable behavior. They don't really have like startup to their attacks most of the time, nor to their movement. So they're running and jumping around the screen and shooting stuff out, and unless you already know what they're going to do, you're just gonna get hit. Like, take Shadow Man, for example. I freaking hate this boss, and he took me a million tries to beat because he is straight up unfair. He has a very simple repeating pattern of behavior. He will jump 3 times, and then he'll do an attack after the 3rd one. In theory, that should be fine. That should be plenty of telegraphing to deal with his attacks. But the problem is he has 2 different attacks he does. He either does this slide or he shoots out some shuriken. And these moves need to be avoided in ways that are incompatible with each other. The slide is instantaneous. You have to jump immediately if you don't want to get hit by it, but the shuriken toss has a little startup to it. If you jump immediately, then you're going to get hit by the shuriken when you fall. So you'd think that the design would be identifying which attack he's going to do and dodging appropriately, but you can't. There's no way to tell which attack he's gonna do, and the slide is instantaneous, so if you take a moment to try to see what he's doing, you're gonna get hit. You have no answer. You could try to stay far away from him so you have enough time to see the attack coming and react, but he's constantly closing the gap on you, so you're gonna get into these situations no matter what. It's just a 50-50 guess of what he's going to do. And when I was fighting the bosses in this game, I really started to think that the fights in Mega Man kind of remind me of playing a fighting game. And I don't mean that in a good way, that's a bad thing, because fighting games as competitive games need to be designed differently from single-player games. In a fighting game, when your opponent is attacking you and they give you a 50-50 chance to block their attack or not, there's gameplay there because you can look at the behaviors of the player, look at their patterns, and try to predict what they're going to do. If they manage to hit you through that, it's because they played well and they managed to mix you up effectively. In a single-player game, there's no way to tell what the AI is going to do because it's purely random. There's no way for me to suss out whether Shadow Man is going to do a slide this time or not. The game is just going to arbitrarily choose whether or not I avoided the attack, which I find extremely frustrating in an action game where the entire thing is my inputs leading to my success. Taking that out of my hands makes it feel like, what am I even doing here? And maybe this is just I'm bad. Maybe there is a pattern to what attacks he does, or there's a better strategy out there. But I've had this kind of problem with lots of bosses in lots of Mega Man games, and it never stopped annoying me. You know what's funny? This game has a lot of bosses that I found really annoying, but like one of the major gimmicks with Mega Man 3 is the introduction of Proto Man. Oh my god, it's a cool rival guy with all your same abilities, and you fight him multiple times. But like, Proto Man's a total bitch. He's so easy to beat, which I found kind of funny considering he's like such a big deal to like this game. Anyway, another thing I didn't really care much for in Mega Man 3 was how they changed up kind of the second part of the game. As someone who didn't know that much about the Mega Man series, I figured that the formula was you do the 8 Robot Masters, and then you go to Wily's Castle for the final gauntlet of extra hard levels. But starting with 3, that structure kind of changes, and instead now the 8 Robot Masters is like the first half of the game, and now there's a whole extra section leading up to the Wily Castle, And in the case of 3 here, it feels kinda a bit rushed and like padding, where they have you revisit levels you've already played, but they remix the level design and add some new enemies, and you have a new boss fight with these new robots that have the powers of the robots from the second game. And I just really didn't care for this that much, because I found a lot of these levels kind of annoying, and so I wasn't exactly thrilled to be refighting them. And then the fights basically just being refights with bosses I've already beaten, I wasn't really too into. And it made this game feel like it was just going on for too long, which really is just a sign of the fact that you don't like the game. Like, if you're feeling like, this could be over, I could be done with this game, that just means you're not having fun and you want to stop playing it, and I was kind of feeling that way with Mega Man 3. But by far, the thing that annoyed me the most playing this game was this frickin' section right here, and I'm sure Mega Man fans know all about this. Because one of the things with the original Mega Man games is they don't refill your weapons when you die. If you spend it, then you have to just keep going with whatever you have left. Which I do have problems with that I'll talk about more later on. But one of the big problems with that system is that if there's a section where you must use a certain ability and you run out of ammo for it, you're just screwed. This happens in Mega Man 2 in the lead up to that big dragon boss. You have to use the floating platforms to get to it. And if you die too many times on the dragon, then you just run out of that, and then you have to waste time grinding to refill it. But at least you could do that in Mega Man 2. Here in Mega Man 3, with this section, you need to use Rush Jet to get across. But if you die here and you don't have any more Rush Jet, you automatically game over. There's nothing you can do at this point. The checkpoint is right here. You can't refill it. You don't really have reliable ways of grinding for enemies. You just have to die to run out of lives, game over, and restart the level from the beginning. Just because you died in this one section right here. Completely unacceptable, if you ask me. And on top of all the other things that I was just like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with this game? That was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, and I was just so done with it, and I wanted to stop playing. So let's stop talking about Mega Man 3 and start talking about Mega Man 4, where things take a turn for the better. I think this game is a really notable step up over the first 3 Mega Mans. It's one of my favorite of the NES games, and kind of one of my favorites in general. I think it's pretty good. This is when the Mega Man games start to get noticeably easier. This one's definitely a lot easier than the first 3, but I am totally okay with that. While I do like hard games, especially old games like this, a lot of them can teeter on the very edge of being like a good, fun, difficult challenge and just annoying, and I feel like the Mega Man games kind of dip into annoying too often. So if I have to pick between something that is challenging but grating, or something that's easier but more enjoyable, I'll take that, and I definitely feel like Mega Man 4 is in that kind of space. One of the things I really like about Mega Man 4 is the introduction of the Mega Buster, being able to do the charge shots. Similar to the slide, I think that adds a very nice, simple, extra layer to the gameplay that gives you a little bit more to think about, and just makes it more satisfying in general, because now there's more thought put into how you fight. It's not just about shooting out as many attacks as you can as quickly as possible. Now you also need to think about which attack do you want to do, and there being a charge to using the Mega Buster, it's not something you can just bust out whenever. You have to use it ahead of time at the right moment. Is it worth it to shoot now, or should I charge up so I can do more damage in a few seconds? It gives you something to do in those periods when you're just dodging enemy attacks and you couldn't even be hitting them anyway. Now you can be productive towards doing damage to them and progressing the fight further. It's a great new addition. That and the slide together, like having these 2 extra elements that flesh out the Mega Man gameplay just a little bit more, makes the games much more interesting to play. You know, as someone that likes my games to be very complicated and nuanced, I like seeing extra layers getting added here, a little more consideration for me as the player, more things for me to pay attention to and think about. I always like that in a game if it's well done, and I think the Mega Buster plus slide, they work really well to do that for these games. However, at the same time, there is also a trade-off to this. With now the Mega Buster, you are much more powerful at a base level when it comes to dealing with enemies, and now I find myself using the weapons significantly less than I already was kind of barely using them, because now I feel like the Mega Buster and the Charge Shot can handle anything the game throws at me in terms of enemies. Now it's extra not worth it to pull up the menu and try to use weapons against the enemies for like weaknesses or what might be better for the situation. The Mega Buster is like always the best thing for every situation. So that is a problem, but at least it's a problem that's not getting in the way or being frustrating. It's just an area where the design could be tightened up a little bit. I quite like the level design in this game compared to the first 3 games. I feel like they've really like dialed in exactly how a Mega Man level should be designed in terms of like having good challenges. I guess I could talk a little bit about the kind of ideology of the design that goes into Mega Man levels, since I haven't talked about the actual like gameplay in the levels themselves yet very much. Because the Mega Man games are room-based. Each room is its own challenge, essentially, and rooms will either be just a single screen or they might scroll a little bit. And each one tries to do something ever so slightly different. And each level, each robot master has different gimmicks and different enemies that you have to deal with. And each screen is its own little micro-challenge that plays around with the elements and the gimmicks in different ways to pose different challenges to the player. The thing about the first few games is that the challenges they would throw at you were really kind of tedious in how they were laid out. Like Mega Man 1 especially, almost every single jump had to be like perfectly at the edge, maximum distance if you wanted to clear the gap, and that's just annoying. Certain screens could take significantly longer than other ones, and they feel like they kind of hurt the pacing a little bit, you know, when you gotta do like the blocks or whatever. Sometimes you'll get just these massive difficulty spikes where this one part is just way more punishing than anything else for like no reason. And 4 is the game I feel like where they finally started to like really get it down of like, okay, don't make it too annoying, don't make it like too overly precise, don't make it too much of a gauntlet where you have to do too much without hitting a checkpoint. And they do a good job of playing around with the gimmicks in this game and making for some interesting platforming setups that are different than anything you've seen in the previous games. That's actually something I think that overall the Mega Man series is very good at. I'm very impressed by like the amount of ways that they can just come up with things to throw at you, whether it be gimmicks or enemies or just platforming setups. For such a simple game, they do a really good job of constantly coming up with new things for it. Also, one thing I like about 4 compared to 3 is that it doesn't have as much emphasis on using rush coil, so you don't have as much of that problem of constantly having to pull up the menu for it, so that's nice. Also, this is when Eddie is introduced in the series, which me, as someone who's never played Mega Man before, I didn't even know this character existed, I didn't know who this was, it's just this little robot dude that comes and gives you items, and I'm like, oh man, thanks buddy, whoever you are. By the way, something else that's worth noting about Mega Man 4 is it seems to be that this is when the games start to get a little bit more production value put into them, because this is the first one that has like a nice little intro cutscene explaining kind of the origin of Mega Man and what was going on in that first game, since none of that was there originally. And that was cool, I like that. But also something I found interesting about this, in the game, he's referred to as Rock, which really caught me off guard, because I know about the whole, like, Mega Man in Japan is actually Rockman, and the character himself, his name is just Rock. So I figured for the West, with him being Mega Man, I don't know, would they keep that, or would they not do that? I thought his name would just be Mega Man, but I was really surprised to see that, oh, no, his name is still Rock in the English version. That's interesting. And speaking of production value increases, Mega Man 4 especially is when the games start to get a lot prettier looking, you know, and this is common for early NES games. Like, they would look very primitive and rough, but over the console's life, developers learned how to utilize it better and get more out of it toward the end of the console's lifespan, and Mega Man's 4 to 6 really show that off very well. Some very good 8-bit sprites here. I am quite the fan. However, I'm not done with Mega Man 4 quite yet, because I've been mostly pretty happy with this game, singing its praises in many ways, but I do still have to give it some shit, as I did have one very significant problem with this game. The final boss is some fucking trash. When the screen is just completely black and Wily teleports around and you have the tiniest fraction of a second to see where he is and hit him, and most of the time he's in areas where you can't even hit him anyway. Oh my god, it's so bad. It's better if you use his weakness against him so you can actually hit him in most of the situations, but sometimes he just teleports in a way where he's just out of the way and you can't get to him. And the fight just takes fucking forever, man, and it's so, like, simple and uninteresting, and it was really tedious, and if you run out of his weakness, then it gets even worse. which was quite the letdown for me. I thought I had finally found the Mega Man game that I can just say, in general, I really like and don't have any major problems with it. But then it just had to have that one thing at the end, and it really had me hopeful for, like, when are they gonna get everything right? When are they finally gonna get the Mega Man game that doesn't have any major problems or annoyances? Just a good, fun game that I can enjoy and recommend to people. I'm looking forward to when I get to that Mega Man game. But until then, I had to move on, of course, to Mega Man 5, which I was pleasantly surprised to see is even better than Mega Man 4 in my opinion, and was actually very close to being what I was looking for. It's not quite there. I still think that this game does have some of those problems, mainly just the same kinds of issues that most of the Mega Man games have. But overall, in terms of its design and the way the game plays, I think this is by far the best one yet, and the best of the NES games. There's not really much to say in terms of like what 5 does to put it above the others for me. It's kind of just like more of 4, just like getting the formula down even tighter, getting it more refined, getting it even better with more fair level design more consistently. By the time of 4 and 5, they did away with the, oh, you didn't do the thing that you had no way of knowing you were supposed to do, so you automatically game over. Like, that's not a thing anymore. The boss behaviors, again, are very digestible and understandable, which, like, for reference, what I mean when I say that is a big part of Mega Man is trying to, like, learn the boss behavior, because they do things that you can't react to. What you have to learn through trial and error is, like, what do they do in certain situations? How do they react to what the player does? And in the first few games, I found it impossible to figure out how to beat the bosses without dying several times on them first. Whereas 4 and 5 are the first games where I was actually able to beat some of the bosses first try. Which again, yes, these games are getting easier, but also it's because their patterns are more understandable. I can see what they're doing, I can figure it out, I can understand what causes them to do what versus what more consistently and easily. So I actually know what to do before I die, and I can start adjusting my strategy accordingly. That makes it feel a lot better and a lot more fair. It doesn't feel like I'm just going into the grinder until I figure out what to do. I actually get to fight the guy and have a realistic chance of winning. And this was the first Mega Man game for me that didn't have the bullshit part. It didn't have the really annoying boss or this one level that I just hated. There was really nothing like that. I enjoyed this whole game experience overall. It still had problems due to just some of the fundamental Mega Man stuff that I'm not really in love with. But within those things, I think this one does a really good job. Like, I would say if you're gonna play an NES Mega Man game, 5 is the one to play. I feel like it gets the whole formula the best. Also, the music is really sick in this game. Obviously, Mega Man music is super beloved and super famous, and it's very good in all of these games. But 5 really stood out to me. I was like really bopping to a lot of the music here. Reminds me a lot of Shovel Knight, obviously that's very influenced by Mega Man, but this especially sounded a lot like that kind of music, which I really enjoyed. The only other minor thing I want to mention about 5 is that weirdly, this is the only game in the series to implement Negative Edge, which most people watching this probably have no idea what that means. It's a fighting game term, and it means that an input will be triggered both when you press the button and when you release the button. So in the case of Mega Man 5 here, it's whenever you shoot. You can see almost every time I shoot the Buster, I fire 2 shots. That's because he fires 1 shot when I press the button and 1 shot when I release the button, which I really like. Makes it a lot easier to like quickly mash out and fire a bunch of shots. I think it's a good feature, and for some reason they do away with it after this game. It was the only one they ever did it. Kinda weird. Anyway, moving on to Mega Man 6, the final of the NES games, and you would think with a series like this, where they're clearly just building off of the previous games with every new entry, this would be the most refined, the most polished, the most developed Mega Man of the original run. And yet, amazingly, it's not. They screwed up the controls in this game really badly. This is the only Mega Man game where you're not allowed to jump out of the slide, which feels really terrible and was screwing up my muscle memory from playing the last few games. And it's also just like, why? I don't understand the reason for this. It doesn't really add any extra depth or challenge or anything. It just makes the controls feel bad. But even worse than that, basic movement has also been screwed up here. I don't even 100% know what the problem is, but sometimes my jump input just gets eaten and Mega Man won't jump. It seems to be like when you're turning in the opposite direction, if you press jump at the wrong time, then he just won't jump. And I took a bunch of damage because of that, because I'd be weaving left and right trying to jump over enemy attacks, and it just wouldn't happen. I assume this is some kind of bug. I can't imagine this being intentional. This was not a thing in any of the previous Mega Man games. Like, what happened, man? Everything was perfectly fine, and then for this one, someone apparently decided to go into the code and make some changes that introduced these new problems. These control problems alone make Mega Man 6 quite a dip for me after 4 and 5, which I quite enjoyed, and I would really love, again, if someone could make a ROM hack to fix these issues in this game, that would be great. Unfortunately, that's not the only issue here in Mega Man 6 that makes this a step down compared to the previous two. I also find that the bosses here have regressed back to being more of those really frustrating kinds of bosses that you saw more in the first few Mega Man games. Some of them are fine, but some of them, like this dragon boss here, I found really annoying, and this tank boss. What even is this thing? How are you even supposed to fight this? I don't know. It's a clusterfuck, it's a mess, it's terrible. Another thing worth mentioning about Mega Man 6 is that this one is by far the easiest of the NES games, and a big part of that is thanks to the new Rush power-ups that you acquire. You got the power suit thing that lets you do shorter range, more powerful attacks, which is okay, but then you also have the jetpack, which is ridiculously good. It makes so much of the platforming so much easier. Which again is one of those things where I'm like, well, that kind of takes away the fun of actually doing the platforming. But at the same time, this being now the 6th Mega Man game, I've played a lot of this kind of gameplay and this kind of platforming, and even if it does take away a bit of the challenge, I find that these power-ups do a nice job of shaking up the Mega Man gameplay a little bit, so I did actually quite like them here. One other problem I had with Mega Man 6 is I was not a fan of the collectibles in this game. This is not the first one to do collectibles. 4 had a couple of secrets you could find, and 5 introduced the letters of Mega Man you could collect that would give you Beat, which is like a little bird friend you can send out to fight enemies. It's actually very useful. To get Beat in Mega Man 6, you need to collect the 4 letters of Beat, which are in certain specific levels. The problem I have with it is that in Mega Man 5, you could collect all the letters just by playing through the stage. They weren't like hidden, they were just there and you had to go for them. No problem. But here in Mega Man 6, you cannot get the letters on your first playthrough sometimes because it will require one of the power suits that you might not have at that time. So you're going to have to come back later, replay the stage, and get to that part that you couldn't access before, and now get the collectible. And I don't really feel that adds anything super beneficial to the game. It just forces you to revisit some levels, and it kind of messes with the pacing. Like, you do the 8 Robot Masters, and then you move on. Oh wait, no, hold on, I gotta go back and replay some stages first just to get to this one room that I wasn't allowed to enter before. Not something I'm really a fan of. Not that it's, like, terrible or anything, but I felt like the previous games had a much stronger sense of progression by just going level to level to level, and then on to Wily's castle. Anyway, that's pretty much my thoughts on Mega Man 6. It's quite a shame that this game has these problems, because outside of that, like, the core gameplay, the platforming, the level design, that's all really good, really solid, very in line with 4 and 5. They just screwed up a couple of things that really hurts the experience. It makes this kind of an unsatisfying finale to the NES Mega Man series. Oh well, what can you do? But we are not moving on to Mega Man 7 now. We are actually taking a bit of a detour to talk about the Mega Man games for the Game Boy, alternatively known as Mega Man World, which is the name I'm gonna go for them just for clarity's sake, so I'm not saying, okay, so in Mega Man 2, and you think I'm talking about the NES one. And for the record, the Mega Man World games were Game Boy games, not Game Boy Color. I am playing ROM hacks of them that turn them into Game Boy Color games, which I would recommend, because it really just makes for a better experience that way, and I will have a link to my spreadsheet of game mods and enhancement recommendations in the description of this video, which I have added a Mega Man Section 2, including a whole bunch of stuff that I think is cool. Anyway, the Mega Man World games, these games suck. They are really bad, and I do not recommend playing them, at least the first 3. 4 and 5 are a little bit better, I'll talk about them later. But there are a lot of things about these games that I just do not think are worth bothering with at all, because, you know, it's basically just the exact same thing as NES Mega Man, but on even weaker hardware that's even more limited and ends up being a notably weaker experience, and I already think the NES games have a number of problems. For one thing that's pretty evident, the screen is obviously much smaller with the Game Boy resolution, so it's a lot more zoomed in and you have less room to work with. That's not really a problem though, they do a pretty good job of adjusting the level design to fit the smaller screen space, but it does mean that you get less variety and less options in how they can create platforming setups. On top of that, probably due to the limited memory capacity of the Game Boy, a lot of the rooms in the games are reused many times over within the same level too. Like, you go through the room once and then later on in the level you're in the same room, but they've changed around the enemies and the hazards or whatever, but you're like, this is still the same thing. Something else that you probably can't see, but you can definitely feel when you're playing the game, is the controls here are not great. They're very sluggish and stiff, nowhere near as good feeling as the NES games. You can get used to it, and then it's mostly fine, but it is just a worse feeling Mega Man. And even aside from all these problems and the technical limitations and everything, there's really just not that much reason to play these games, because they are essentially just rehashes of the NES games. Like, World 1 here is an amalgamation of levels and bosses from Mega Man's 1 and 2, and all these games are like this up to 4. They take 2 or maybe 3 Mega Man games and just pull things from that. Because of that, you don't really get a very new or worthwhile experience with these Mega Man games. It just feels like you're playing a lesser version of the NES games. Now, it is worth mentioning that while the level themes and gimmicks and enemies are taken from the NES games, the actual level design and layouts are original to these World games, but they're not really anything like that special or amazing that I would say you have to play them for that. It is mostly just more Mega Man, but pared down and not as good. And sometimes the level design, especially in these first 3 games, can be absolutely atrocious. There's so much bullshit, unfair, spikes and the disappearing block sections. These games can be really frickin' annoying, way more than the NES games ever could. I really just don't think these games are worth your time. They're just not that good, they're not that fun, just don't even bother with them. At least when it comes to the first 3. 4 is a step up. It still is a rehash of the previous games, but the design here is much better, and the finale of the game is actually kind of cool, because they always do the Wily Castle thing at the end, but this one kind of changes it up, where it's like Wily's spaceship, and it's just a cooler set piece, and they play with that in more interesting ways. Gets a little bit more epic. I like that. One thing that's interesting is that World 4 here is the first Mega Man game to introduce money, which would then become a thing in the main series with Mega Man 7, but it actually comes from here, as well as a couple other things come from the World games, like the structure of Mega Man 7, where instead of having all 8 Robot Masters available, you have 4, and then a midway point, and then 4. That too also comes originally from Mega Man World 3. So it's interesting to see these kind of lesser handheld side games have some influence on the main series going forward. But ultimately, I still wouldn't race to recommend 4. It is still mostly more the same kind of thing as the first 3, just not as bad. However, Mega Man World 5 is actually quite good. I would say on par with the NES games, even some of the better ones. This game is actually really impressive. It is far more ambitious than any previous Mega Man game I've covered here, even the NES ones. It's the first game to put some real story into the actual game itself, with cutscenes and really cool set pieces, like this one part where you're in a spaceship and it's like, whoa, this is kind of awesome for a Game Boy game. And unlike all the previous ones, World 5 is completely original. It does not take enemies and levels from the NES games. It's all new stuff for the first time, and it's pretty cool. It actually feels like a real full-on Mega Man game. The level design here is by far the best of the World series. You do still have that thing where they reuse screens a lot, but it's just overall a much better experience than the previous ones. The only major thing I would say with this one is that most of the bosses are ridiculously easy, but one thing I will say is that the final boss of this game is actually really awesome. It's a really good final fight that really took everything to beat him. I thought it was really fun and satisfying in a way the final bosses of these games haven't been previously, and part of that also comes from the story going on here. I was actually kind of a little bit invested in what was happening. It's pretty freaking cool, man. Like, World 5 was the first Mega Man that when I finished it, I was like, damn, that was a friggin' game right there. That was good. So while I would say don't really bother with the first 4 Mega Man World games, if you're a fan of Mega Man, and especially the original NES ones, definitely play Mega Man World 5. It is just as good as them. Though, one thing I do want to say is that while I can acknowledge that this game is quite good, about on par with the NES games, much better than the previous ones, I didn't, overall love my experience with it, probably just because I was playing so many Mega Man games back to back to back. Probably kind of starting to get tired of the formula and the way these games work and the way these games play, and still, ultimately, this did feel like a downgrade from the NES games. This series is just really stuck in its ways. It's extremely formulaic and just doing the same thing over and over. Like, people complain about, Call of Duty, it's just the same game released every year. Mega Man was the Call of Duty of its time. They released one every year, sometimes multiple in the case of these handheld games, and they were the exact same thing down to a T, just repeated. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but me personally, when I play games, I like to see evolution, I like to see improvement, I like to see, what can you do with this formula? How can you take it into new places and make it more interesting, more fleshed out, more fun? And they just don't really do that with most of these games, which is a little bit unfortunate. But they're still fun, so I guess it's not that much of a problem. And with that, we are finally done with the 8-bit Mega Man games, and now it is time to shift into the glorious world of 16 bits. However, we are still not talking about Mega Man 7 just yet, as first I would like to talk about Mega Man The Wily Wars. This is a collection of Mega Mans 1, 2, and 3 remade, or ported, or remastered, or whatevered to the Sega Mega Drive. And I wanted to give this a go to see how it compares to the NES versions. What's the best version of playing these 3 Mega Man games? And while I know there are many people that have problems with the Wily Wars, understandably so, honestly, for me, I think this is my preferred way to play the first 3 games for a number of reasons. Most obvious, of course, being the new sprite art. I think it looks really good. You could definitely make the argument that the original games are very much NES games, and that's kind of part of their DNA, so maybe this higher fidelity and higher resolution look to everything doesn't quite feel as original Mega Man to some people. I totally get that, but I think it looks really nice. Especially the backgrounds. A lot of times in NES games, they have just empty backgrounds where it's a black void. Here, rather than that, you get really nice background art that I'm very happy with. And I don't know if this is a bit of a controversial statement, because, Mega Man's NES sprites are super duper iconic, but I honestly don't really think that they look that good. I think that these sprites for him look much better. Still not perfect, of course, but I think that these look pretty good and do a better job of capturing the actual feel of the character as he's supposed to look in, the official artwork. Another benefit you get from these versions of the game is obviously this being Mega Drive, it's much more powerful than the NES, so some of those technical limitations that we had to deal with before are gone, such as the garbage that you would get at the end of the screen. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, one thing about the Wily Wars that a lot of people don't like is that this game doesn't run super well by default. However, in the modern day, when playing on emulation, you can just overclock the Mega Drive CPU and get it to run perfectly, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. You just get a really nice version of these 3 games that look quite a bit better and has some better technical elements. And also, just as a personal thing, I was a Mega Drive kid. I played so many Mega Drive games growing up. They were my introduction to gaming, and I didn't really play any 8-bit stuff, any NES or stuff like that. That was a bit before my time, and it wasn't until much, much later that I would go back to play those older games, and so I don't have any, particular connection to the NES and, the way that hardware is, or the resolution, or the limitations, the sound chip. I just personally find the Mega Drive stuff more appealing to me, so that's a big part of why I prefer these versions. But that's not to say that this is perfect. There are definitely some problems here that I don't love. Biggest one, of course, being the music. As this being Mega Drive, you get the Mega Drive sound chip, which, as most retro gamers would know, can be a bit hit and miss. It could sound really good if they knew how to utilize it well, but sometimes it could sound really bad. And you kind of get a bit of both here in the Wily Wars. Some of the remixes are pretty nice, some of them are kind of ear-grating. Another weird little change that's worth noting, I'm not sure if this was an oversight or something, but for some reason, Mega Man's shots on his default buster are ever so slightly slower than they are in the NES version, and that was actually noticeable to me after playing all the NES games back to back and then coming here. I was like, huh, that's a little bit wrong, and it was kind of tripping me up a little bit, but there is a ROM hack out there that restores it to its normal speeds, so at least there's that. One other thing I noticed is it seemed like some of the bosses were a little bit more difficult in this version of the game. That might just be me sucking, I'm not too sure. But things like Metal Man, Quick Man, Gemini Man, they stood out as like, I was not struggling this much when I played initially on the NES version. And I guess while I'm talking about my first time experience with these games, I should also talk about my second time through here in the Mega Drive versions. I was obviously replaying them after having just played them for the first time, and I gotta say, I found the games to be much more enjoyable on replay, which isn't really surprising to me considering so much of the design of Mega Man is, as I said, already knowing ahead of time what to do or what you're going to be dealing with. When you do already know ahead of time, then you can avoid a lot of the bullshit and you can already do stuff to set you up for success later on in the playthrough. I already kind of knew what weaknesses the bosses had, I knew what strategies to implement for a lot of them, I knew what order to do the levels, I knew how to not miss the collectibles and have to go back for them later. It just made a much smoother experience and made it much more enjoyable, which is good in a certain way. You know, it means these games get more fun as you play through them, get better, learn them, and then they have a lot of replay value that way. But at the same time, that does sort of come at the cost of kind of a rough and somewhat unfair first playthrough that can get a bit frustrating, so it's a little give and take there. One last thing I want to mention with the Wily Wars is once you beat all 3 games, you unlock Wily Tower, which is kind of like an extra mini Mega Man game. It's only got 3 Robot Masters based off of Journey to the West for whatever reason, and then you go straight to the Wily Tower, which is that game's equivalent of the castle. And the big standout thing with Wily Tower is you get to create your loadout using any of the weapons and tools from the first 3 Mega Man games, which is very cool, but also kind of makes this game extremely easy because you just give yourself all the best shit from the other games. But yeah, it's basically just another short Mega Man game, and it's good, but it's nothing like groundbreaking or amazing. I wouldn't say you absolutely need to play the Wily Wars to play Wily Tower. If you want to pass on it, you're totally fine. One thing that's worth noting about this game is that not only do you use the loadouts from the first 3 games, but it uses all the stuff from the first 3 games. The enemies, the hazards, the layouts. It's just more levels using the same things, and it does kind of mix and match them, which is cool. But yeah, because of that, it just feels kind of like a level pack, not really like a full Mega Man experience, but it's alright. Again, this is probably my preferred way to play the first 3 Mega Man games. You get Wily Tower as a cool little bonus, so I'm not gonna complain. And you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna talk about a fan project here. I don't care. It's my video. I do what I want. I would also like to highlight Mega Man The Sequel Wars, a homebrew Mega Drive game made to recreate Mega Man's 4, 5, and 6 in the same style as the Wily Wars. Currently, it only has Mega Man 4 complete, but already this is an incredible fan project. Super impressive, very well done, feels of the exact same level of quality as Mega Man The Wily Wars. Actually even better than it, because on top of doing a great job of recreating Mega Man 4, it has a bunch of like cool extra features on top of that. The best, of course, being that you can play as Proto Man and Roll, which is sick. Roll especially is incredibly fun, because she maintains her slide speed into a jump, similar to Mega Man X, so you can go like way faster with her and do really long jumps to take all kinds of shortcuts, and she's a melee character, basically plays like Zero in the Mega Man X games. She's actually awesome. And in general, this project, like how the Wily Wars is my preferred way to play Mega Man's 1 to 3, this is now my preferred way to play 4 easily. I'm very much looking forward to them redoing 5 and 6, because then you'd have my favorite NES Mega Man game, and 6, which hopefully they can fix all those stupid little problems and get it up to that same level of quality. The only problem I encountered here in the Sequel Wars is the second to final boss seems a little messed up. Maybe it was because I was playing as Roll, but it seems like the hitbox on it is not lined up correctly, and it's much harder to hit than it is on NES, and it made the boss, like, way too hard, so that's something hopefully they can address in the future. Anyway, now it is time to move on to Mega Man 7, and I had quite high hopes for this one. I figured if any Mega Man game is gonna be the one to, like, really get everything right, be the much more refined, polished version of Mega Man, it would be the one on the next generation of consoles. We have a lot more power here, we have a lot more experience making these kinds of games. Surely this is gonna be the Mega Man game for me. And certainly, Mega Man 7 comes with a whole host of improvements over all the previous games that I massively appreciate. But before any of that, I do want to briefly highlight the visuals of this game. I think that this is a gorgeous looking game. Fantastic sprite art, all the characters, all the backgrounds, everything. This is like one of the best looking SNES games in my opinion. The art style here is so great and it's extremely well executed on. As far as what they could do on the SNES, I feel like this is nearly perfect. And when it comes to the gameplay, this is really solid. All the, like, stupid control issues from 6 are gone. This is probably the best feeling Mega Man so far. Doesn't have any of that roughness that comes from it being an 8-bit game like the previous ones. There's no more, like, sprite flickering or, like, weird garbage at the edges of the screen. Don't have that issue anymore of, like, an enemy goes 1 inch off screen and so they respawn. Like, that was annoying in the older games. All that is gone and you get, like, exactly what the Mega Man formula probably was always supposed to be. And with the SNES, not only do we get more technical power, we also get more buttons, which are utilized for finally implementing quick switching. You no longer have to go into the menu to switch weapons, you can now do it on the fly, and oh my god, I cannot even begin to describe how much this improves the pacing and the flow of these games. Massive improvement, and it encouraged me to actually use all of my weapons way more than I ever did in any of the previous games. And actually, on that note, there are 2 changes to the Mega Man gameplay here that a lot of people don't like. One is that you get significantly less invincibility time after taking damage, so you're vulnerable again much more quickly. That I don't really like very much either. But the other one is it now takes a little bit longer to build up a full charge shot. And I totally get why people don't like this, because it feels very incongruous with the rest of the games. Both the previous and following games all have the same charge timing. This one game alone, it just takes longer, and it feels very bad. However, actually playing the game, I honestly think it's a good change, because this nerf to the charge shot means it's not as viable in a lot of situations, so it is less of a one-size-fits-all solution to every problem. I actually found myself weaving between charge shots and my different weapons here in a way that felt perfectly balanced. I felt like I was really utilizing all the tools here and I was not relying on one thing that was significantly better than everything else. Also, a part of that comes from the fact that I think they did a good job on the weapons in this game in making ones that are actually practical and useful and different from each other, so it's actually worth it to switch weapons for different situations. So yeah, don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but I think that the nerf to charge shot here is actually really good, and I almost wish they kept it for the rest of the series. Though I do gotta admit, as nice as it is to finally have quick switching, something I exactly asked for, now that I have it, I kinda realize that it's not enough. I know this might sound like, Jesus Christ, this guy's never satisfied, but, like, you got a lot of weapons here that you have to cycle through, and it's like, if I'm on one weapon and I need to get to another, and I have to press the button 5 times to cycle over to it, and you gotta keep in mind, like, which way is right, which way is left, which weapons are in which order, like, that's a lot that I'm just not gonna keep in my head with this many tools to worry about. And it really made me think that what Mega Man actually needs is a weapon wheel. You know, I've been playing a lot of Doom lately, and that weapon wheel being able to just pull out any weapon at any time for any situation, and you start to, like, muscle memory, you know that this weapon's on the top right and that weapon's on the left, like, really, really good. And I think Mega Man would benefit from that hugely. And there is also the thing that you only cycle through your main weapons. Any of your other stuff, like Rush Coil or some of the power-ups you get later in the game, those you still have to go into the menu for, and I'm still not in love with that. But I don't want to make too much of a big deal out of it. Yeah, there's still more improvements that could be made, but for this game, they did a lot to improve the general flow and quality of life of the Mega Man games, so I really appreciate that effort. Unfortunately, that's kinda where the improvements to the Mega Man formula end here in 7, in my opinion. While all these improvements to the controls and the usability of the game's systems and everything is great, I was also hoping to see a lot of improvements in the design of the game. You know, 4 and 5 were on a pretty good track with refining things, but then 6 they kind of stumbled a little bit. I was hoping now with 7 they'd really get things down and get to a really great point with good balance, good fairness, no more annoying bullshit parts. And sadly, that wasn't really the case here. Mega Man 7 is overall just another Mega Man game. It is not dramatically improved over the other ones, in my opinion, when it comes to like the level design, the fights, the boss design. It's pretty par for the course. It's on the better side of things, but it's nothing revolutionary, really. And there are still a number of parts in this game that I really disliked. The bosses especially, they could be very inconsistent in their difficulty. Like, some of them are super easy, they're almost jokes. And then other ones are, like, really frustrating, took me a million tries, felt like total trial and error. And it just felt like more the same shit from the past 12 games that I've already played. And that's not to say that I didn't like Mega Man 7, I thought that it was a good, fun game, like most of the Mega Man games. But with these games being so repetitive, I'm starting to get diminishing returns out of it. It just feels like going through the motions once again, and along with that, the issues that I have with the Mega Man games are starting to stick out more and more as I get gradually more tired of putting up with this kind of stuff. Crystal Man especially was the thing that made me start to get real sick of this shit. He is like the perfect embodiment of everything I don't like about the Mega Man games, because his behavior and the way you have to fight him is quintessential Mega Man trial and error. Actually, one of the benefits of me using save states is you can watch me just sit there and fight him, and you can literally watch the process of trial and error. In the first fight, I have no idea what I'm doing, but over the course of it, I learn more and more of his attacks and how to avoid them and how to deal with them, and then by the end, I don't even take that much damage by the time I kill him. Maybe that's fun for some people, but for me, it feels like I can't even play the game correctly. You know, in the first couple of fights, it's like, oh man, he's running towards me, because of course walking at you is still one of the most devastating attacks these bosses have. So I'm like, okay, I presume he's going to keep running towards me, because he's got no tell that says he's gonna do anything else, so I'm gonna shoot him and then jump over him. But as it turns out, the way he's programmed is when you shoot him on the ground, he jumps immediately, which means I jump right into him and take a hit, and I had no way of knowing that. And even after I get hit, I still don't necessarily know what I did wrong, because as far as I could tell, maybe he just jumped randomly, because a lot of bosses in these games do that. It takes a lot more time to realize, oh, he reacts to getting hit on the ground by jumping. The only way you learn that is by unknowingly making that mistake several times and getting punished for it without even realizing that you're doing something wrong. Or he shoots his ice projectile that freezes you. Okay, obviously jump over that. Oh, but don't do it too close to the back wall, because it explodes when it hits the back wall and will still freeze you anyway. How was I supposed to know that? By getting hit by it. And getting annoyed with Crystal Man here, it really started to make me think about the true intended experience with Mega Man and dealing with its resource system, and how horribly mean and punishing these games are to players that are trying to get better at them. Lives is one of those things. I mentioned it earlier how I feel like lives really discourage players from trying to learn a game. Lives, in my opinion, the way they're implemented in a lot of games, really don't even make any sense. Lives only make sense if you incorrectly assume that losing in a game is failure, which it is not. Losing in a game is part of the game. It's how you learn. If there is an obstacle in a game that you do not have the skills to overcome, death is an opportunity for you to develop those skills. The failures tell you that you need to improve, and the challenge is your opportunity to improve. The attempts are the process of learning and improving. Which is why it makes no sense to me that a game would be so harshly punishing to the player after they failed a challenge too many times. Like, what is that telling the player? You didn't learn fast enough, and you deserve to be punished for that. Like, what? And that especially makes no sense when you consider that you can have differing amount of lives at any given moment while playing the game. You can play through a stage and get to the end of it with 2 lives, or play through the same stage and just get lucky with random drops and have 6 lives going into the boss fight. So you just randomly are allotted more time to learn how to beat the boss than another player does, due to factors that are outside of your control. Plus there's the fact that nothing stops the player from grinding for lives, giving them functionally infinite attempts. So if the player can have functionally infinite attempts, I don't see why you don't just do that anyway. The only difference is you would save players time because they wouldn't have to waste it replaying levels and grinding. Like, those whole systems of limited lives, there's so many problems with them. I just fundamentally disagree with that kind of design. I think we should be encouraging players to learn and get better at games, not being super harsh on them for not getting good quickly enough. And that's bad enough in games that are, quite frankly, well-designed and fair. But it is so much worse in the Mega Man games. Picture this, if you will. You have a really hard time getting through a level, and you limp your way to the end of it, and you have no lives, and you have barely any health left over going into a boss that you've never fought before. In another game, that could be very, very difficult, but possible if you're really good. In Mega Man, you're screwed at that point because the very nature of these bosses and their behaviors is that you have to learn them through trial and error. But because you got to the fight with no health left, you have no room to make any errors. You might as well game over the player before they even walk into the arena because they have no chance. The game is saying that you didn't complete the level well enough to earn enough time to have a chance of maybe learning how to beat the boss. So you have to go back and re-complete a challenge that evidently you've developed the skills to already complete because you got here in the first place, and you have to perform better this time to earn the right to even learn how to fight the boss. Like, the way these games are designed, it feels like I'm being told to draw a picture, but I'm in a pitch-black room, and the piece of paper and pencil have been hidden, so I need to stumble around in the dark with no idea what I'm doing to even find the tools I need to start drawing the picture. Oh, and also the room is covered in needles, so if you feel around in the wrong place, then you're gonna get hurt for that. And it's not just your lives that work this way. The Mega Man games are almost like survival horror games, because you have limited everything. You have limited lives, limited healing items, and limited ammo. And in a similar situation, if you're fighting a boss that's giving you a really hard time, you might use an E-Tank or maybe even 2 against them, and maybe you'll try to use their weapon weakness to make it easier. But if you're still having a hard time with the fight and you die anyway, then you still lose those E-Tanks and that ammo. You wasted them, once again, because you didn't learn how to beat the boss quick enough, which is more forgivable because you don't need those things to win the fight. But it's just so mean to the player. Like, if they're using those things, then clearly they're having a hard time, so we're gonna punish them by making it even harder for them going forward. I just don't understand why these games are so harsh. There's no need for this. And this isn't me complaining about the games being too difficult. I'm totally fine with difficult games. It just feels like this is the wrong way to make your game challenging. And just to be clear, again, this is not a problem I had with Mega Man 7 specifically. This was across almost the entire Mega Man series. And it's not like I was seething at this stuff. I'm not, like, super angry about it. It's just I was playing these games, and I found myself repeatedly getting frustrated and annoyed, and this is why that was happening. It is, in my opinion, a problem with the games, and I thought it would be worth talking about because it really hampered my enjoyment of them. But I did still enjoy them. I did still have an overall good time with Mega Man 7. I just think these games would be significantly improved by adjusting some of these things. But anyway, I'm done with my little rant there. So now it's time for me to rant about something else, because I have more complaints for Mega Man 7. This game kind of expands upon what 6 started doing with the collectible stuff. This game has a lot of collectibles and a lot of secrets hidden around in the stages. Lots of cool, unique little upgrades you can get, like the Rush Suit kind of from 6, but it works a little bit differently, or you can get Proto Man Shield and a bunch of other things. And my problem with this is pretty similar to the problem I had with it in 6, in that this is now making me go back and replay a bunch of stages and look for a bunch of stuff. And You know, to be fair, this is optional, so you don't have to do it, but if you do want to go for it, I don't find it to be an especially enjoyable experience, because you're just replaying a linear stage you've already played just so you can, like, use a power on this one thing you didn't have before. Kinda feels like a waste of time, and also, a lot of these secrets are, like, so hidden and so obtuse that, like, you would never figure out a lot of this stuff on your own. You'd have to look it up online. Like, you get the rush search thing where he can, like, dig for items and secrets, but there's really nothing indicating that there's a secret here for Rush to dig up. You just have to randomly use it everywhere, I guess, to find it, and no one's gonna do that. And there's no way to, like, narrow down where the secrets might be. There's nothing, like, on the level select that indicates, like, oh, there's still 2 unfound secrets on this level. Maybe go check it out. So you're just, like, taking shots in the dark if you don't just use a walkthrough. But realistically, you're just gonna use a walkthrough. And I never really think that's a good thing for a game to have to bust out external resources. Totally kills the experience, in my opinion, and I did not at all have a good time getting all these collectibles in this game, and really, I barely even used them anyway, so it's just not worth it here. Oh yeah, also, minor thing, maybe this is me being stupid, but I didn't know how to open the shop for my entire playthrough. I was like, I'm getting all this money, where's the shop? How do I go to the shop? How does that work? How was I supposed to know you press select on the level select screen to go to the shop? There's nothing that tells me that. I was probably in the manual or something, but I ain't got no manual. You know what year it is? Would it have been so hard to put a little shop icon with the button prompt in the corner? Come on, man. Speaking of the shop, thanks to that, you can really negate a lot of the challenge now, because you can, like, stock up on so many E-tanks and basically have infinite health going into the later levels. Which, again, I would normally criticize, but if you couldn't tell from my whining earlier, I don't exactly find the challenge in these games the most fun to engage with, so if I can cheat around it, I'm gonna take it. And speaking of the later levels, actually one thing 7 does is it goes back to the format of the first couple of Mega Man games, where we no longer have, like, an interlude part between the Robot Master stages and the Wily Castle. We just go straight to the castle after you beat all the normal stages, and I quite prefer that. I feel like it's better for the pacing. A lot of those games that did have that, like, extra section, I felt like they were kind of overly long in the tooth. I like this better, and this is how pretty much the rest of all the Mega Man games go, which is fine by me. But you know what's not fine by me? Oh my god, the final boss of this game is the biggest piece of trash I've ever seen in a game. This fight is so friggin' terrible. This is the one instance in this entire series where I absolutely cheese this with save states, and I don't care, I have no regrets. This is, like, unforgivably terrible. Like, what even are you supposed to do here? Talking about, like, trial and error, I was throwing myself at these attacks trying to figure out how on earth you're supposed to dodge them for a really long time, and I still don't know how to avoid them. It feels like so many times you end up in an unwinnable situation where you're guaranteed to get hit. If you just so happen to be standing in the wrong place, or you can't, in the fraction of a second you have, come up with a movement pattern that might make you avoid these 4 shots, dude, it is abysmal. What the fuck is this? Who approved this? How did this get through playtesting? There is no way that any kid got through this without just using a million E-tanks. Pure and utter garbage. I know I said that I still like Mega Man 7, but yeah, it's one of the more, like, mid-tier Mega Man games for me. I vastly prefer 4 and 5. You know, this game, it's a little bit more extreme than the previous ones. The highs can be a little bit higher with all the nice quality of life improvements, and just generally, I really like the aesthetic of the game, the music, the visuals. But then, god, the lows on this one are the worst in the series so far, except maybe those first couple of Game Boy games. But before we move on to 8, I do want to talk about one last thing with 7, which is the ending, where I was like, what the heck? Where Mega Man is gonna kill Wily? I'm like, whoa, that got really intense out of nowhere. But then some people on my stream let me know to look at the Japanese version, and like, ah, yes, okay. That's not what actually happens in the Japanese version of the story. That was some localizer decided to write their own fan fiction into Mega Man. Gotta love 80s and 90s localization, where they just do whatever the heck they want. I mean, this isn't the worst example I've ever seen. Sometimes they'll completely change absolutely everything about the story, or even the game itself. They'll reskin it with different visuals and everything. But, yeah, that's not how it's supposed to be. That felt very off-tone for Mega Man and what this series is, and I was really raising an eyebrow to that. But, hey, thankfully there's ROM hacks to restore the ending to the real ending if you want. And actually, while we transition over to Mega Man 8, I want to take some time to talk about Mega Man, the franchise, the characters, the world, because I haven't mentioned any of that in this video so far. That was intentional because the first several Mega Man games really got nothing going on. Basically, every single game can be summed up with, Dr. Wily's doing a bad thing, Mega Man, go stop him, and that's like the whole story. But they'll add like some little twist, oh, is Dr. Cossack or Mr. X or whatever, but it's always just Wily in the end. It doesn't really mean anything. And in terms of, like, the Mega Man world and the characters, there's, like, nothing there for the longest time. Like, it's kind of weird now coming to this series after it's such a big thing, and I know a lot about Mega Man. I know him, and Roll, and Dr. Light, and Wily, and Proto Man, and all these things. But then when you actually play the games, there's, like, barely a thing. Like, Roll does almost nothing across the entire Mega Man series. She's not even really a character. And all the other ones they add over time, Otto, Eddie, Beat, it's like you're expanding this cast of nothing characters that are just like set dressing in the background for like the one cutscene at the beginning of the game. Like, I don't know, it just made it kind of hard for me to see why these characters are so beloved beyond like their character designs. Like, personally, I have no love for Mega Man the character, or the world, or the cast. I don't really care. I'm not like, oh man, Dr. Wily, he's such a fun villain. I got nothing, I'm sorry. I really just don't care. These games have given me no reason to care. I mean, there are things that I appreciate about Mega Man, like the clear influence from Astro Boy, and someone in my stream mentioned that there's also a lot of Super Sentai influence here, which immediately when they said that, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, all the posing that like the Robot Masters do and stuff, and Mega Man himself just being a normal boy, but he transforms into Mega Man, he becomes a superhero, like, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm bringing this up now because 8 is a really, really big shift for the series, where they decided, for some reason, to put a lot of work into the presentation and storytelling of Mega Man. This game has a bunch of full-on anime cutscenes that go on for several minutes and have, like, really good production value to them. It's, like, really nice, honestly. Now there's a whole bunch of voice acting in the game. Like, they put so much work into this stuff, and I don't really know why, because ultimately the story here is still mostly just Wily does a bad thing and Mega Man has to go stop him. They do introduce this whole new element, this robot dude from space, but it's not really that important. This is still just a traditional run, jump, fight the bosses Mega Man game, and I don't really think it needed this much budget put into such a minimal story. I mean, it's cool, I'm not going to say it's bad or anything like that, but something else worth mentioning is now that we have voice acting in Mega Man, it's time for my weeaboo nature to come out, because I played this game in Japanese. Complain about it all you want, too bad, it's a Japanese game with Japanese story written by Japanese people. I like to listen to it in the language that it was intended to be in. And by the way, the Japanese version of Mega Man 8 has this like really sick anime OP, and it's like a really catchy song, it's kind of been stuck in my head lately. Big thumbs up for me on that. But yeah, playing Mega Man 8 in Japanese definitely felt like the right move for me. It felt very appropriate and like how this should be, especially like with the Robot Masters, when you like pick them on the character select, they have a little quip now, and it's like... oh yeah, that's cool. I like that. I know everyone likes how funny the bad dub is of Mega Man 8 with Dr. Wily, but I wanted to actually appreciate the story as it was really intended to be. And while we're talking about all the Japanese-ness of Mega Man, why don't we talk about that whole thing? You know, the Mega Man versus Rockman thing, because you know what? I'm gonna say it because it's my opinion and it's what I think, even if people don't agree with me. I think Rockman is a better and cooler name. I totally get why people don't agree with that, because it does seem a little bit weird that, like, you know, in the series it's always like something man and it's related to their abilities, you know, Fireman, Bubble Man, whatever. But then he's Rockman, but it doesn't have anything to do with rocks. You know, Mega Man, he's the more, like, neutral kind of character. He can take on the abilities of everybody else, so something like Mega seems more appropriate. I totally get that. But it's not that kind of rock. He's not Rockman like rocks. You know, it's a superhero thing. The character's name is Rock, and so when he goes into his hero form, he's Rockman. It's like if I was to become a hero, I would be Pariah Man, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a little goofy in that way, but this is also a series for children. And in general, I much prefer referring to the character as Rock than Mega Man. I've been doing it throughout this video just for the sake of people not whining the whole time. But, you know, that's supposed to be the thing in these games. They give the characters, like, musical names, because rock and roll, they're brother and sister, that's a thing. You have Proto Man, who his real name is Blues. You have Beat the Bird. In Mega Man World 5, they get a cat named Tango. One of the bosses in one of the Mega Man World games is Punk. It's supposed to be a thing in this series. You might go like, why? What's the deal with the music name thing? But it's just like a naming scheme gag that they do, in the same way that like Dragon Ball characters are named after vegetables and whatever. And I especially dislike how in the English version they change some of the character names, but not all of them, so you still kind of have that musical name thing, but it's like incomplete and weird now. Because now you have Mega Man and Roll, so now her name being Roll doesn't make any sense. You now no longer have the major characters being named after music, like rock or blues, but then you still have other characters, like Beat, that are still named after music. And it really exposes how little thought and effort was put into, like, the rebranding of Rockman into Mega Man, because for the minor characters, they're like, whatever, it doesn't matter. And that kind of thing bothers me, I don't like that. So yeah, I prefer the Japanese names for all the things. I prefer Rock and Rockman over Mega Man. Honestly, also, along with all that, I just think it sounds cooler. Mega Man has too many syllables, in my opinion, doesn't roll off the tongue well, but Rockman, especially when you say it in Japanese, Rockman, I like it. I think it sounds cool. However, for the purposes of this video, as to not annoy people, I will continue to refer to them with their English names. I'll continue to call him Mega Man, but for my own personal purposes, I think I'm gonna be going with Rock from now on. Oh yeah, one last thing actually, with the whole like renaming stuff, you know who's weird in all of this is Bass, because that's a character that got renamed for the English version, but they still gave him a musical name. Okay, so what are we even doing? What's even the point of renaming the character now? Weird choice, but I guess while we're talking about Bass, I don't know how other people feel, but I think this character is really stupid. I do not like Bass at all. I think he is so lame. Because first of all, he's like the dark rival Mega Man, but we already kinda had that with Proto Man. I don't know why we needed another one of those. I guess Proto Man's like a neutral good guy now, so he no longer works as the rival, so we need to make another Mega Man to be the rival guy. It's like Shadow the Hedgehog all over again. Or actually, this came first, so Shadow is a ripoff of Bass here. But also, in general, like, I think Bass has a stupid design. The wings on his helmet just look dumb, and, like, as a character, he's like, I'm gonna be the strongest robot, and then you just beat him constantly in the games he's in. He's just so fucking dumb. I hate this character, he's so stupid. Anyway, before we start talking about the gameplay of Mega Man 8, I do want to briefly talk about the visuals of this game, because I'm kinda split on it. Overall, I think it's a really good-looking game. You know, it's rare that you would get 2D games on the PlayStation, because, oh, 3D, but it's nice when you do get them, because with the PlayStation, you get a higher resolution than you'd get on an SNES or Mega Drive, which means you can have really large, detailed sprites that don't take up too much screen space, and you can have lots of colors, lots of things on the screen, and all of that is utilized really well here. This is a very pretty-looking game. But I don't know if this is just me. I don't like Mega Man sprites in this game. I think he looks kind of like, I don't know, weird. He doesn't look cool. Like something about his proportions and like the pose, the angle that they use to display him at. I just don't like it. I think he looked way better in 7, personally. But that aside, and now talking about the game of Mega Man 8, I gotta say, I was very surprised by this one. This is the game that I knew the least about going in, because through osmosis, I've learned a fair amount about the Mega Man games. You know, the first 6 on NES, and then 7 on SNES, 9 and 10 being the throwbacks, all that stuff. But 8 I've really not seen very much on, so I didn't really know what I was in for with this one, and I was really happy to see that this game is kind of the change-up and the evolution to the Mega Man formula I was looking for in 7. This game introduces a lot of really great new features, probably number one for me being the fact that now your special weapons are on a different button than your main buster shots, which means you no longer have to switch to nothing if you want to just do the normal Mega Buster stuff. You can now keep a weapon equipped at all times and now seamlessly go back and forth between the two. And thanks to that, even though you have the faster charge shot from the older games, I was still using my weapons a lot in this one because there was nothing impeding me from doing that. I could have access to my weapons and the charge shot simultaneously. Such a fantastic feature, and one I never even thought to implement in a Mega Man game. On top of that, they've done something very cool with the weapons in this game. Many of them double as movement tools as well. For example, you get this little electric beam you can shoot out, but you can also use it as a grappling hook on these metal bolts. Or you get this little tornado trap you can put on the ground, which you can use to jump higher. I think that's really cool, expanding not just your combat capability, but also your platforming abilities as you get more powerful over the course of the game. And along with that, this game also plays on the newer structure of Mega Man that they started with the Game Boy games and then into 7, where you don't have all 8 Robot Masters, you get 4, and then there's a midway stage, and then the next 4. Because of that, the level designers know that you're going to have the first 4 set of weapons going into the second set of 4, so they can incorporate them into the platforming in a way you couldn't do if you could just pick any stage in any order. In something like 7, if you needed a specific weapon for a specific thing in a stage, it was only for side secrets and collectibles, but here they can actually bake it right into the main path, which I think is really cool. Also, a lot of great quality of life features come along with this to prevent a lot of the typical Mega Man problems that I've had in many of the previous games. For example, now when you die, your weapons are all refilled, meaning you're not left completely screwed if you need a weapon to do a specific thing. Although on the flip side, it does mean that ammo conservation and really thinking about that is kind of not really a thing anymore. I'd never found myself unable to use a weapon I wanted to. But I think that is a very favorable trade-off to avoid that nightmare that you could run into in some of the older games. Another thing I like here is when you get health items or ammo, the game no longer freezes, so that means your input's not getting eaten, and that no longer being a problem. Really good. Another thing worth mentioning is the collectibles in 8 have been streamlined. Rather than having all these obtuse secrets all over the place in 7, you now just have a single kind of collectible hidden around in these large vaults, which you can then take to the shop and cash them in for special upgrades. And I like this as like a skill tree system, basically. You get skill points, and it's like, ooh, do I want to get lots of cheap upgrades, or do I want to save up for a couple of really powerful upgrades? You know, that kind of thing is always pretty compelling. But something I find kind of funny about this is some of these upgrades aren't really upgrades, in my opinion. They're just improving the game design and should probably just be in the game by default. For example, one of the upgrades you can get is exactly something I mentioned earlier. If you start a stage with less than the starting amount of lives, then they will give you that many lives, which is like, see, I told you, they acknowledge that's a problem, that's why it's in here. And once you get that upgrade, you no longer have to do that stupid thing where you kill yourself so you can get your lives back. And I'm sitting here just like, why is that an upgrade? Shouldn't that just be how the game works? You clearly know it's a problem. Another one that they have is you no longer need to hold fire to charge a shot. It'll just charge passively, and just pressing the button will get you to shoot it, which I think is really just kind of an objective improvement, because one thing ever since the charge shot has been introduced is you're holding down the fire button basically 100% of the time when you're playing these games, and I just don't like it when a game makes me pointlessly hold something down all the time when you could just make it an automatic function. I feel that same way in like shmups or Contra, where there's a shoot button, but there's literally no reason to not be shooting at all times, so why don't you just shoot automatically? The same thing with the charge shot. There's really no reason not to be charging, so just do it for me. That said, while I do find this whole collectible shop system pretty cool, after going through Mega Man 7 and wasting a lot of time replaying stages, hunting for things, looking stuff up, I really was not in the mood for doing that shit again, so I just didn't get everything in Mega Man 8. You know, I grabbed the bolts I saw, But I didn't go back and go through every single stage and try to track down every single one so I could buy everything in the shop. I just didn't care that much. And I know in a lot of these older games or games like this, people be like, no, you gotta get all the collectibles, that's part of the experience. But, like, for what? Just to have everything, just to say I did it, just for 100%? I don't care about that. I'm trying to have fun here, man, and I don't find looking for this stuff fun, so I didn't do it, and you know what? That made the game better for me. I'm sorry. By the way, another thing I want to talk about with 8 is the stages, because they changed things up quite a bit here as well, in a couple of different ways. For one, the stages can be a little bit more experimental, finally. After a billion games of the same thing, they decide to try something a little different in some of these stages. For example, you have this one stage where it's like a temple you go into, and you gotta go into all these different areas to basically, like, get keys to open the way forward. That's a little different, that's kinda neat. And also, something interesting about 8 stages is that they are really long. These are much bigger than the stages in any other Mega Man game. In fact, they have, like, midway points where it loads into, like, Act 2 of the stage, and you keep going from there. Like, these stages are too big to have the whole thing loaded all at once, which was very surprising and kind of cool. And even though these stages are much longer than the previous Mega Man games, they don't feel too long. They feel like a perfectly fine length where I wasn't really getting tired of them or anything. There is one thing that I could see being a bit of a problem for people if you're playing on official hardware, which is the load times. PlayStation games could often have pretty lengthy loads that could get annoying, but playing on emulation, you can actually speed up load times to the point that they are negligible, so no problems for me. This game honestly really impressed me. Like, it's trying a lot of new things, it's experimenting a lot, doing some weird stuff for Mega Man, but pretty much everything worked out really well here. And perhaps most important, this game doesn't have any of the typical Mega Man bullshit. There was no, like, annoying difficulty spikes, there was no part of the game that was ridiculously punishing for no reason, I never got frustrated, I never felt like something was unfair. Like, dude, 8 is the one for me. This was the Mega Man I was looking for, where they fix all the problems, evolve the gameplay a little bit. It's really great, is what I would be saying, if not for one thing. While there is a lot of stuff that this game does really well, and I really enjoy many aspects of it, it does have one problem that unfortunately is very severe and kind of ruins the entire experience for me. This game is so easy, man. Way too much. This is by far the easiest game in the series. It seems like in trying to round off all the rough edges of Mega Man, they overcorrected that maybe a bit too much and also decided that challenge was too much of a problem in these games. I mean, just look at some of these boss fights against the Robot Masters. They're, like, pathetic, dude. They barely do any damage. They have very simple, easy-to-avoid attack patterns. Like, yeah, everything's telegraphed now, so you can see what's happening and avoid it properly, finally. But it's way too easy to do, and the stages are the same way. The platforming is all very easy, nothing really does very much damage. You're at very little threat of ever really dying in this game. And thanks to that, I found this one of the least memorable Mega Man games that I played. Like, I couldn't tell you what half the Robot Masters are or what their stages were like, because I kind of just absorbed them completely passively. I didn't have to think very much, I didn't have to try very hard to get through the stages or the fights. And it's kind of weird, like, of all the problems that the Mega Man series had, I actually didn't feel like difficulty was one of them. Yeah, there would be things that would be frustrating, and sometimes the systems would get really annoying, but, like, the platforming design, the way the challenges would be laid out in front of you, how you'd have to deal with a lot of the enemies, I always thought that was mostly fine in these games. And this one decided to tone all of that way down to the point that I really didn't find this game too fun at all, really. It just kind of felt like going through the motions, and especially after playing so many Mega Man games in such short time, this just felt like the most unsubstantial experience of them all. Like, it's just the Mega Man formula with nothing for me to really get into. No major problems, which I appreciated, but also nothing that made the game especially enjoyable. It's just really middle of the road, which makes my feelings towards this game a little bit complicated, because there's a lot of things I do appreciate about it, but I find even the more troubling games like Mega Man 1 more fun to actually play. And I guess this isn't too surprising, because this happened with a lot of series and really was happening with Mega Man as well. Over time, they'd start very hard, and then they'd get easier and easier as the series goes on, as gaming gets more popular, and they try to appeal to a wider audience. Fortunately, this does not become the series norm. After this, we go back to more typical Mega Man difficulty, which I appreciate. So, you know, this is just the easy one, and thanks to that, it's not really the one for me, unfortunately. But before we move on, there is one last thing I want to say about Mega Man 8. I'm not as familiar with Capcom developers as I am, like, Nintendo. Like, I don't know a lot of the staff there. I don't know what teams made what games. Like, I don't know who made Mega Man or what other games at Capcom they had worked on. I don't know if this game is made by a different team than who made all the previous Mega Mans or what. But just playing this game, this feels so Capcom arcade fighting game to me in so many ways. Like the sprite art, especially on like the characters. Like the snow boss dude in this game, that just looks like a Darkstalkers character or something. Like it looks straight out of a Capcom fighting game. The music also feels very Capcom Fighter, and like the incorporation of voice acting into things, the way that the bosses like say all their quips when you're fighting them and stuff. It feels very, very fighting game. I don't know if this was made by, like, divisions of Capcom that normally work on their fighting games, because that was really big at this time. Around now, Capcom was literally making, like, 6 fighting games a year or something like that with all their different series. So I could see maybe at some point one of the fighting game teams had an open slot, and they're like, hey guys, you want to make a Mega Man game? And they're like, sure! And so they made a very Capcom Fighter feeling Mega Man game. Which, as a fan of Capcom fighting games, I kind of like that. It makes this one stand apart. Someone in the comments let me know, like, who's responsible for this game or Mega Man or why this one feels so fighting gamey. I'd be very curious. But now we move on to Mega Man 9, right? Wrong! We got a couple other games to talk about first, such as Mega Man and Bass, the infamous Mega Man and Bass, which is the only other Mega Man game that I had played previously. As for why that is, it's mostly just because I got a translation hack way back, and I just decided to play it randomly. Because for most people, Mega Man and Bass was a Game Boy Advance game, but it was originally SNES, and the GBA version is very problematic because you get those classic screen crunch problems, which means you can't see very far, and that makes the game much harder than it already is. But anyway, what is Mega Man and Bass? It's kind of like Mega Man 8.5, sort of. It's a little bit weird, because it is just straight up a complete mainline, normal, traditional Mega Man game for the Super Nintendo, which housed a mainline Mega Man game before, but it's just not mainline, even though it's completely indistinguishable from a mainline game. I presume this was done because this game came out after the PlayStation was already out, after Mega Man 8, and so, like, releasing a Super Nintendo game, it was probably to, you know, give people that didn't have the newer consoles yet a Mega Man that they could still play. You know, a last-gen equivalent to the next-gen Mega Man 8, that kind of thing. So they probably didn't want to have it be weird that, like, we're going up to the PlayStation and then back down to the Super Nintendo for Mega Man 9, so they made it not a numbered entry. Little weird, but understandable. And boy howdy, does this game have a reputation. A lot of people do not like Mega Man and Bass for it being so incredibly difficult. And I'm gonna be honest, as someone fresh to this series who just played all the other entries very shortly before playing this one, I didn't really find it that much harder than some of the other entries in the series. Yeah, it's the hardest one so far, but not like a crazy amount harder than something like Mega Man 1 or 2. In fact, here's an opinion that really goes against the grain. This is the first Mega Man game where they would allow you to play as another character. As the namesake, you can play as Bass here, and he has a slightly different moveset than Mega Man. He can do like a Mega Man X-style dash, and he can carry that dash speed into his jumps, and he also has a double jump, as well as the ability to shoot in 8 directions, but he cannot move while he's shooting, so, you know, he just plays a little bit differently. And many people will tell you that this game is unplayable as Mega Man, that it's designed for Bass, and that he's the way you should really play it. And I don't agree with that. I actually found playing as Mega Man both more fun and easier than playing as Bass. Part of that might come from the fact that I did Bass first, so I already knew the game when I was doing my second playthrough as Mega Man. But part of that, I think, is that it's not as clear-cut as people make it out to be. Mega Man is harder, Bass is easier. It's actually more of a trade-off between the two characters. Bass is easier in the platforming thanks to his dash and double jump, but he is much weaker when it comes to combat, and the bosses are significantly harder with him. At least I felt that way, because he does way less damage than Mega Man. If you just look at this first boss, look at how little damage Bass does, and then look at how much damage Mega Man does. He can kill things way more quickly and easily than Bass can. Like, you don't have to survive nearly as much, you don't have to do nearly as much dodging. And I found the bosses to be the real source of difficulty in this game, so I found the Mega Man playthrough notably easier than the Bass playthrough. On top of that, I also found Mega Man to be more compelling because since the levels are designed so that either character can play them, all of Bass's advanced movement isn't necessary to complete the stages. It lets you skip platforms, take shortcuts, and circumvent a lot of the level design, but in my opinion, that makes the game too easy and a bit uninteresting, because you can just soar over so many of the obstacles, whereas when you're playing as Mega Man, you have to actually do the platforming, and I found that made the game much more fun. So yeah, I don't know if I'm crazy here, but I really don't see where this game gets its reputation from, of being the super duper ultra hard Mega Man game and the one that you should definitely play as Bass because he's easier. I just don't see that. That was not my experience with it at all. That said, I still have a number of problems with this game. Like, for one, it undoes a lot of the good quality of life changes that 8 did. Like, for example, when you die, it no longer refills your weapons. The heck's up with that, man? Why are we regressing? I don't know. Maybe it's a setup for what Mega Man 9 would eventually be. And another way in which this game undoes some of the good from 8 is that bullshit is back in a big way. In fact, it is worse than it's ever been. While I don't find this game to be especially more difficult than other Mega Man games, it is significantly more unfair in many respects. Boss fights are back to being super annoying, super trial and error, super unfair, and especially Burner, man. Oh my god, this boss is so bad. You can end up in situations here where there is literally nothing you can do, where you're up against a wall and he's just flamethrowing and jumping at you, and there is actually no way to not get hit. Or like there's this one boss that's actually really cool where you're on this like counterweight thing and you gotta like stand at the right elevation to make the boss vulnerable. That one's fun. But then right when you kill the boss, it just drops you in a pit of lava and will kill you. Like, what the fuck is that? And good lord, this tank boss is cancer. What is this? Who designed it, and why do you hate your players? This has got to be one of the dumbest, most poorly designed, unfun boss fights I've ever seen in any video game I've ever played. And actually, this boss is in a really annoying gauntlet of a level that has 4 bosses in it. Like, Jesus Christ, man, are you going a little overboard, maybe? Like, that's the thing, I think, that makes people say Mega Man and Bass is so much harder than the other ones. In that many ways, this game is just kind of more poorly designed, kind of similar to Mega Man 1. But in this game, when you get those difficulty spikes, they are really steep and really bad. The one thing I would point to that makes this game more difficult than other Mega Mans, that's not just it being poorly designed, is that there are no E-tanks in this game, and that's something that you come to rely on a lot in Mega Man. And on one hand, I'm like, oh, well, that's good. It means you can't cheese the challenges anymore. But when the challenges are this crap, then I really wish I could cheese them. So that is a thing, and it does make stuff like the boss rush harder because they don't give you healing in between. But at the same time, you didn't have any of that in Mega Man 1 either. Outside of that, this is mostly pretty in line with the general challenge level of all the other Mega Man games, I would say. As you can see, this game also reuses a lot of stuff from 8. Clearly this was like a budget game or something, like the sprites, a lot of the characters, enemies, background stages, even some of the bosses are just taken directly from 8. The fights work differently, but it's the same guy that you fought in the other games, so they just didn't have time to make a full roster of new bosses here. And for the record, I still think Base is stupid. Making him playable has not improved my opinion of him. If anything, I'm like, why did you waste the one game that lets you play as another character on that loser? I would much rather play as Proto Man, because he's actually kinda cool. Whatever, clearly they don't know what they're doing. In fact, you know they don't know what they're doing, because the next game we have to talk about is Mega Man Powered Up. This is a reboot slash reimagining of Mega Man 1 made for the PSP, and it is dog shit. I hate this game. It is one of the worst ones in the whole series in my opinion, rivaled only by the first few Game Boy games. First things first, I don't think I even need to describe this because you can see with your own eyes, Jesus Christ, this game is hideous. I don't know what they thought they were doing with this style. I guess they were going for like, well, in the sprites, Mega Man's like tiny with a big head, so we'll just elaborate that out. Don't do that, that's bad. Look at how bad this looks, oh my god. This chibi style for the characters is atrocious. Everything's like way too like rounded. It looks like everything's made of like inflatable toys or something. Even the colors are garish. Like, I'm actually impressed how bad this game looks coming from a major publisher. And the gameplay ain't much better. As I said, this is a reimagining of Mega Man 1, which means it's very similar to Mega Man 1 in many ways, but the actual level design itself is brand new here with a lot of new elements. For example, this has 2 new Robot Masters that have been introduced to bring it up to the 8 found in most later Mega Man games, and these 2 definitely do not match at all with the original 6, like in terms of art style and their general design. Stick out like a sore thumb, but whatever. The thing about Powered Up being based on Mega Man 1 is it's kind of the worst of all worlds in this case, because Mega Man 1 is one of the rougher Mega Mans with all of its weak design, and this game has like all of that, but even worse. All the like new design here is similar to 1, but made now even more annoying than it already was. And on top of that, like most of the Game Boy games, it means that this game doesn't stand out because it just feels like shit you've already played before in the original Mega Man 1. So the game both feels like a tired rehash and also just kind of a shitty game. I gotta tell ya, I was so checked out playing this one. I did not want to keep going. I hated it. Maybe I was just getting tired of this formula and playing all these games back to back, but god, I was not having fun at all with this. And actually, no, it's not just that I was tired of these games, because in Powered Up, you can play the Powered Up version, which is the reimagining, or you can play Classic Mode, which is a much more faithful recreation of Mega Man 1 in this system. And I was having way more fun just playing Mega Man 1 here, although this would never be my preferred way to play this game because it's so ugly. But it does go to show you that no, it's the actual game of Powered Up itself that is so bad here. Now with this being a reimagining, you'd think that they would bring in stuff from maybe the later Mega Man games, but no, you got no charge shot, no slide, none of those quality of life improvements from 8, you got nothing here. And the bosses face a lot of the same problems as the level design, where it's like similar to what was in the original, but even worse. Like that one freaking boss with the blocks is like somehow even more annoying than it was originally. How did they even accomplish that? And the final boss in this game is also infuriating. It has, in theory, a cool idea that I'm surprised they haven't actually done in these games before, where it switches its weakness, so you gotta use different weapons depending on what it's currently weak to. But the only indicator you have of its weakness is this little, like, gem on top of it and what color it is, and you have to know which weapon is supposed to correspond to that color and switch to it really quickly, which is hard because half the time that gem is off screen and you don't even know what the weakness is supposed to be. God, it's fucking terrible. And after playing this trash game and then having to deal with that horrible final boss, I was so done. And you know what's especially funny? This is the first Mega Man game to reward the player for beating the Robot Masters without using their weaknesses, something that I already like to do anyway. The game now acknowledges, like, hey, you didn't have to do it the easy way, you did it legit, so here's a little bonus for you. But what is the thing that you unlock for doing that? You unlock that Robot Master as a playable character. which in theory would be pretty cool if I wanted to play this game more than once. But are you fucking kidding me, bro? It's actually laughable. Like, this game has so many playable characters with Mega Man, the 8 Robot Masters, and you can get Proto Man and Roll as DLC characters, so you can do like 12 playthroughs of Mega Man powered up, as if anyone on planet Earth wants to do that. And playing as the other characters isn't even that cool, because, like, the Robot Masters just have their weapon as their only thing they can use, so it's just a lesser version of playing Mega Man. Proto Man is just a super overpowered Mega Man that automatically has this crazy overpowered charge shot, which makes the game easier, and I'm not going to complain about that, because the easier it is, the less of a pain it is to play through, but I'd rather just not play it. And then Roll is a melee character that swings her broom around, but she doesn't have, like, the cool slide stuff from the sequel wars, so she's just kind of not good. So I really don't want to play as any of these characters, or this game in general. And, like, there's even more stuff in here. There's, like, a whole challenge mode where you can do a bunch of, like, really mundane, uninteresting little micro challenges. Again, there's, like, a million of these, many of them with all the different playable characters. They're not fun. There's a level creator in this game, too. You could, like, share your levels with other people online. It's like, Jesus Christ, how do they put so much work into this piece of shit? This game, man, Mega Man Powered Up. This one, I tell ya, it's something. This is by far the worst one, in my opinion. I'd rather play the first couple of Game Boy games over this, honestly. I'd rather stare at a blank wall and do nothing than play this. This was one of the least enjoyable experiences I've had playing a video game in a very long time. Thankfully, it's mostly smooth sailing going forward. We don't have any terrible games to worry about anymore. Now we move on to Mega Man 9, which we get quite the gap between the last mainline game and this one, which might make you think that we're going to get a lot of advancement in the Mega Man series, but as a matter of fact, we get the polar opposite of that. We get regression. I mean nostalgia. We get nostalgia. Yes, as many people know, Mega Man's 9 and 10 are done in the style of the NES games, which I partially understand. I think the original classic Mega Man series is most known for its NES games. I think that's generally what people think of as the golden age of Mega Man. But there hadn't been, like, a real proper Mega Man game in a really long time, and, you know, at this point, gaming had gotten much bigger and more violent with the Xbox 360s and your PS3s and whatnot. But it was also the beginning of digital distribution for games, so that meant that publishers could make smaller games that didn't have as much budget to them and didn't need to make as much money, so they could take a chance on something that wasn't as mainstream and maybe tried to appeal to an already existing audience that hasn't been served in a while. And so I understand the motivation to try to make something that feels very authentic to classic Mega Man, to recreate the feeling of those original games. But personally, it's not really to my taste. I am not really one that likes to wallow in the past and get all worked up in nostalgia and such. I like to move forward. I would much rather see an evolution of Mega Man. What can we do with these games now in a modern context with more powerful hardware, more technology, more developed tools for making video games, more advanced game design, as there's just been more time for developers to figure out what to and to not do with their games. That would be something much more personally interesting to me, but that's not what we get here. What we do get, however, is a pretty solid Mega Man game. Of course, the whole effort to bring back this old style of game that hasn't been made in a long time falls flat on me, as I've just played through the whole series for the first time, so this just felt like another Mega Man, just like all the other ones. But I'll at least give them credit where it's due. They've done an excellent job of recreating the NES style here. This looks exactly like the original Mega Mans, and that comes down to more than just reusing the sprites of the old games. The new sprites all feel very in line with it. Even the art style, like the character designs of the Robot Masters, the enemies, the overall look of the levels, everything feels 100% perfectly spot on. Music as well, right in line with what you would expect from NES Mega Man. However, while it might look the part, this definitely is not an NES game, and you can tell, you can feel it when you're playing the game. This is much smoother feeling, much nicer than actually playing the NES Mega Man games. You don't get the technical limitations, you don't get the sprite flickering or any kind of garbled sprites or anything like that. It all runs perfectly at all times, and it just in general feels so much more responsive than the original games. It's great. The game itself is also great. The level design here I think is all really strong. I think the bosses are well designed, they're fair, they're fun. You know, this game's not doing anything revolutionary, but it does everything really well, better than most of the original Mega Man games, I would argue. And I'm happy to say that I think the difficulty balance here in Mega Man 9 is really good. It is a challenging, classic-style Mega Man game, but I don't think it ever has any moment that gets overly punishing or frustrating, something that takes too long, something that gets annoying. This game overall is just really well designed. It doesn't have any major problems here. That said, I do still struggle to say that I'm in love with this game because of the ways that it regresses the Mega Man formula. Like, everything that it does here is really good, but it's the things that it, for some reason, refuses to do that kind of bothers me. Like, okay, they're going for NES-style Mega Man, and that means regressing some of the things from later Mega Man games. I get that, but some of these things that they've undone doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, there's no quick switching in this game. Even though you absolutely have the buttons to do it, they just don't allow you to do that because it's like an NES game. Or even within the NES games, the later ones would add some new stuff to the formula, but this game doesn't have any of that. You got no slide, you got no charge shot. You obviously don't have the ability to have a weapon equipped and still use the Mega Buster. Like, all of that is gone. And like I said, some of it I understand, some of it just makes no sense to me. But then, bizarrely, the thing they did keep from some of the later Mega Man games is the shop and money. That's still here. And a little note about this game. I didn't know this, but when you go into the Wily Castle, you can no longer access the shop. So buy all your stuff before going into the first Wily level. I didn't know that, and I wasn't able to spend most of the money I had in the game. So, there you go. That's how you know this really is a classic Mega Man, because they still catch you with things that you didn't already know what you were supposed to do in advance. But yeah, that's a minor thing, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. After so many Mega Man games, I've become decently good at them, so even without, like, a bunch of E-Tanks or whatever, I didn't really have much of a problem here. Yeah, there's really not that much to say about this game. It's just good. It's just a good, solid, well-made Mega Man game that I really enjoyed. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is I feel like this game has really great production value for what it is, and just the right amount of story emphasis. In Mega Man 8, I feel like they went way too hard, honestly, and were kind of taking things a little bit too seriously. I think this is a good balance, where there's, like, real stakes and real problems happening, but it's not overly serious. We're not trying to be all anime dramatic about it or anything. I actually quite like how this game kind of ignores, like, stuff from the later games. Like, Bass just doesn't exist here, which I'm glad about because that character sucks. Like with anything, over time, the Mega Man series did evolve in its style and its tone little by little, and I feel like this game went back to the sweet spot of when Mega Man really hit its stride with, like, the identity of this series, but then it brought it to life in a way that those games never actually managed to, which I think is great. One last thing I want to mention real quick about this game is there's a little bit of extra content in there, some more challenge stuff that, once again, I don't really care for. But there are some cool things that came as DLC initially for it, like Proto Man as a playable character finally. Took long enough to get him in a game that doesn't suck like Powered Up. Though I am a little bit split on how Proto Man actually plays. On one hand, it's kind of cool because they recreated the way he works in his boss fight. He can only have 2 shots out at a time as opposed to Mega Man's 3. But then aside from that, he works like Mega Man in the later games. He has the slide and the charge shot. So that's cool. It gives you a way to play as that kind of later NES Mega Man. But as a trade-off, Proto Man takes double damage, which makes the game significantly harder, which kind of hampers the experience for me a little bit. I would have rather just like an alternative playthrough with Proto Man rather than him being hard mode and you get some extra tools a little bit. Oh well, still cool, and there was another DLC that added an extra level to the game, which is like a really long, like, gauntlet challenge of a level. It's just like solid, more Mega Man 9, good level design, fun boss fight at the end. This is good. This It's a good game. It's just a good Mega Man game. You know, of course, it does have a lot of those older problems from the older Mega Mans because it brought back a lot of that stuff, but obviously they knew that would be the case. They deliberately did all that with this game, so that's what they were going for, and when you accept that for what this game is, I think you got one of the best original-style Mega Man games they've ever made. I would definitely say this is a better game than any of the actual NES ones, except maybe 5. And most of what I have to say about Mega Man 9 also applies to Mega Man 10. This game is basically the exact same thing as 9, down to the level design style, the feel, the tone, the production value, the everything. It is literally just more of the exact same thing, even more than the NES Mega Man games were just the same game over and over again, which I guess isn't too surprising, because with the original Mega Man games, they were very similar because they were reusing a lot of stuff, but they were still trying to push Mega Man forward because they were state-of-the-art, top-tier games at the time, but these being smaller downloadable games for this time, they're deliberately keeping things very small scale and very unambitious. They could have done more with 10 if they wanted to, but they chose to keep things within the walls of what they've decided these retro Mega Man games are going to be, which makes for maybe not the most exciting sequel in the world since it's just more of the same, but it is still mostly a solid game, though I think that it's not quite as good as Mega Man 9. I feel like this game isn't as well designed. I had a very bad first impression of it because I picked Strike Man stage and it was just really goddamn annoying. Like, this one mini-boss here was kicking my ass and I couldn't really figure out a reliable way to fight it without taking a bunch of damage. A lot of the level design, like the gimmicks and the obstacles they would throw at you, were really getting on my nerves. The boss himself, I found that it felt more like older Mega Mans, kind of a little bit more trial and error-y, a little bit less like I have the ability to tell what's happening. And I really didn't have that kind of issue in 9. I felt like all the bosses there were very digestible. So I'd say Mega Man 10 isn't quite as strong a game as 9, but still fairly solid. And this game also had some DLC as well, where they did add Bass as a playable character alongside Proto Man, and he plays the way he did in Mega Man and Bass, which is kind of cool, and he doesn't have the double damage thing, so you get to just play the game. Neat, but I wasn't really interested in doing another playthrough here. And I guess the last thing to touch on with 10 is the story. It's just like a robo-virus that's affecting robots all around the world. So along with defeating Wily, they have to try to get a cure to save all of the robots. But I do want to highlight that Roll gets a really nice moment here. Finally, this character does something. Because at the beginning of the game, she gets infected with the robot virus, so it's like, oh, we gotta save Roll, we gotta get the cure for her. But when you give her the cure, she doesn't actually take it. So that way, later in the story, when Mega Man gets the virus, she gives her cure to him, so he can be back in fighting shape, so he can defeat Wily and get the virus to save all of the robots. You know, she's putting the greater good above everything, and it's a nice little moment for her character. This was the first time ever that I was like, oh, I like the Mega Man characters. I like what's actually happening here. If we had stuff like this across all the games, then I would be a fan of this world and these characters, because that was really great. By the way, one last little detail is you get a little, like, news reporter telling you what the situation going on in the world is, and it's Chun-Li from Street Fighter. That's fun. And that will transition us into Street Fighter Cross Mega Man. That's right, I'm talking about this game too. I bet a bunch of the hardcore Mega Man fans don't even know about this one. And some people might be going, Brian, this is a fan game, you shouldn't be talking about this. But while that is technically kind of true, it is also technically kind of an official Capcom Mega Man game. This started as a fan game, but then Capcom got involved. They got people working on the project, they gave the creator some budget, and they released it themselves officially on one of their websites. So this is technically an official Mega Man game, and thus I'm gonna talk about it like an official Mega Man game. This was made as a joint celebration of the anniversaries of both Mega Man and Street Fighter, and I think this is a really awesome concept. You take the traditional Mega Man structure, you gotta beat all the dudes and get their powers, but you make those dudes Street Fighter characters, and their powers you get are their moves from Street Fighter. And the execution of the concept, I'd say, is pretty decent here. It's not perfect. This game is definitely not up to the caliber of an actual proper official Capcom Mega Man game. Particularly the level design is notably weaker here. The levels are very simple, very easy, not that much going on. And visually, this game is definitely not up to par with the official Mega Man games. You know, you compare this to 9 and 10, and it's not really at that same level. But at the very least, it's not, like, bad. It's not horrible level design. It's not something that I ever found to be particularly super interesting, but it never got to be bullshit or anything like that. It's just kind of a diet Mega Man experience, but I'm willing to forgive that because where it kind of lacks on the level side of things, I think this game actually does really well with the boss fights. Rightfully so, considering the premise here, the boss fights are honestly maybe some of my favorites in the entire Mega Man series. And part of this, I'm willing to admit, is because I'm a Street Fighter fan, so I found a lot of this stuff really fun and really cool. But I found the bosses in this game to be really fun. Fighting them, I think they're just good, solid fights. They're well designed, they're fair. But also, I found it really cute the way that they would take the characters' movesets from a fighting game and adapt them into Mega Man boss attacks. And it kind of made it so that I knew what to expect with these bosses before I even fought them. Like, yeah, go in to fight Blanca, and I'm like, alright, he's gonna be doing Blanca balls at me. He's gonna be flying around the screen. And this game also has Ultra moves from Street Fighter 4 that the characters can do, and again, it's their same moves from that game, so when Blanca did his Ultra, I knew what it was immediately, and I knew how to avoid it ahead of time, which is kind of like that problem that I would criticize Mega Man games for, that it's about knowing ahead of time. But because this is based on an existing game and you can have that foreknowledge, and I did have that foreknowledge, I thought it was really cool. Maybe non-Street Fighter fans would find this annoying, because like, how was I supposed to know he was going to attack the whole ground? But I mean, at that point, it's just no worse than most Mega Man games, so I think that's tolerable. And another thing I found fun about the bosses here is for the first time, I actually had a solid inkling of what their weaknesses might be, again, because of my knowledge of Street Fighter. Like, Ryu's weakness being Urian's Aegis Reflector makes perfect sense, because Ryu's the fireball guy, and so you reflect them back at him. Like, of course that would be his weakness. The character matchups kind of inform the weaknesses here in a way that actually is logical for the first time, again, for people that have played Street Fighter and would know these things. And this game had a lot of boss fights in it, and I was here for it because I enjoyed them so much, and it was all the fun Street Fighter references. It's not just the original set of characters. You fight Vega, you fight Balrog, of course Bison is the final character. Surprised to see Sagat wasn't in here, and it would have been cool if Akuma was in there as like a secret bonus boss or something, but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this game. The boss fights here are really fun, and I love all the Street Fighter stuff. Overall, it's not the best Mega Man game in the world, but I found what they were doing here really charming, and it's free, so if you're a fan of Mega Man and/or Street Fighter and you haven't played it, might as well give it a try. My god, I can't believe that you've made it all the way here, but it is now time to discuss Mega Man 11, and this is very much what I was kind of hoping for and looking for in Mega Man's 9 and 10. A modern Mega Man game, not a game where we try to be just like the old Mega Man games, a game that looks at the Mega Man formula and what those games were and says, okay, well, what can we do with that now? What can we do to make it better? I don't know what the general consensus out there is on Mega Man 11, but if you ask me, this is the best Mega Man game, hands down. I really enjoyed Mega Man 11. I loved so much of what this game was doing. Firstly, visuals, music, the whole aesthetic and everything. I think this game looks great. I literally do not think that you could make a modern 2.5D Mega Man game look any better than this. I think this is fantastic. Feels very authentic to classic Mega Man, but you know, with some extra detail and such, which you could argue is maybe a bit unnecessary, but overall, I think it looks really good. I love the new thing where Mega Man's helmet changes depending on what weapon you have equipped. That's a fantastic new change that they can do thanks to this being a 3D model. Looks way better than just changing his colors. I'm a big fan of that. But beyond all that, when we start talking gameplay, that's where I'm really happy with Mega Man 11. So first of all, this game has the best controls of the entire series. It plays so silky smooth, so nice. It has every quality of life feature that you can think of from any of the previous Mega Man games, as well as lots of great new ones. Like, for example, they put Rush Coil just on a button, so you can just summon him whenever, don't have to go into the menu, don't have to do anything. You have to do very little menuing in this game at all, because of course we have quick switching back, but they have added a weapon wheel, exactly what I wanted. And I'm sure people earlier were like, oh, they added one in 11. I didn't know that at the time. When I was saying, man, this could really use a weapon wheel, that was like when I was playing 7, and I just felt like that would be good. And now having that in 11, oh yes, it is as good as I hoped it would be. It makes all the weapons so much more accessible because at any given moment I can just bust out whatever I want, and as I said, you can learn where they are and be like, fire, give me that, and then I can just use it right away. It doesn't have the thing where you can use the buster while you have a weapon equipped, but that's fine because you can just switch to whatever, whenever, without having to pause or do anything. It's great, and I think they did a really good job with the weapons in this game, giving them all really good, useful, different functions that really makes it so I'm constantly, like, changing up what I'm using, busting out the right tool for the right job. It works fantastically. And the levels here, I think, are probably the best in the whole series overall. Really good platforming setups, the least bullshit of any Mega Man game thus far. They give you a lot of opportunities to take advantage of your different tools and use them in different ways. The only thing I would criticize these levels on is sometimes you do get spikes in how punishing they can be, such as they might throw out some insta-kills at you. Like this one section where you're running away from this wall of fire, if it touches you, it instantly kills you, and that felt like it was maybe going a little bit overboard. Playing through these Mega Man games, you know, they've had insta-kills in them since the beginning with spikes, but I've started to kind of feel like I'm not really a fan of insta-kills in this kind of game where, you know, you got that big health bar and you can take lots of hits. So it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. You make a little mistake here, little mistake there, and by the time you get to the boss, you're almost dead. So, you know, every little mistake matters. They add up. But then when you have an insta-kill, it kind of just undoes any good performance you had leading up to that. No matter how many obstacles you avoided, no matter how many hazards you managed to dodge, if you make one mistake at this one part, then boom, you're just instantly dead. None of your other performance matters, good or bad. And I just don't really like that. I feel like you get a more satisfying experience when all of your mistakes contribute to eventually killing you, rather than just one thing doing all of it suddenly. And this particularly stood out to me in 11 here because I wasn't emulating this game, so I had no access to save states, which means I did have to play with lives legit. And yeah, they were as bad as I thought they were, because getting through this fire stage, I game overed, and I had to play through it again. And then I got to the boss, and I game overed again, and I had to play through the whole stage once more. And it just felt like doing stuff I had already done and already developed the skills to do. It didn't feel like I was earning anything. It just felt like the game was saying, play that level again, and I didn't want to. And part of the problem there in particular comes from the double gear system, the big new gimmick for Mega Man 11, which really feels like a gimmick. It feels exactly like, well, we've made a million of these games, but we want to try to do something different in this one, so we'll throw on this weird thing. And as weird and as tacked on as it may feel, I actually think the double gear system is one of the best things they've ever added to Mega Man after you get an upgrade, because the double gear system enables you to enter two different states. You can enter either power mode, where your attacks will do more damage, or speed mode, which will slow down the speed of the game. And while power gear is useful immediately, speed gear is not, because it also slows down Mega Man. There's no advantage to using speed gear. All it does is slow down the game and give you more time to read and react to things, which can be useful if you're struggling to keep up, but that's not a problem I usually face in games, and I usually find these kinds of slowdown mechanics pretty useless. But partway through, an upgrade becomes available where now it slows down the game, but not Mega Man, and that makes it actually have a function that is really cool. It opens up a lot of opportunities for optimization just from building off of elements that have been in Mega Man since the very beginning. Like, you have those enemies that are hiding under the helmet, and then they come up and shoot, and they're vulnerable in that period. In this game, you can shoot them with a charge shot, and that will also open them up briefly, but not long enough for you to finish them off, unless you shoot them with a charge shot and then activate speed gear so you have more time to land more shots and kill them in one go. You can extend the gaps in between hazards, allowing you to skip waiting periods. You can slow down enemy projectiles coming your way to create new openings to dodge in between them. There are so many great applications for the speed gear, none of it necessarily being like explicitly built into like, use the speed gear now to slow things down. It's just like sensible application of the mechanic in situations when it would just be useful. In my opinion, this is just how it should have worked. Why do you have to get like halfway through the game for it to actually do something this cool? Like in that level when I was trying to get away from the wall of fire, if I had this version of the speed gear, that would have been way better because it could have slowed down the fire, gotten a big lead on it. Kind of a weird choice, in my opinion, to make the speed gear kinda useless for the first chunk of the game, but at least it does eventually become one of the coolest mechanics in Mega Man. And while the power gear might be a lot more straightforward, it is also very interesting both on its own and how it works in tandem with the speed gear. Because yeah, you use the power gear and it does more damage, pretty simple, but also you get a double charge shot off of it so you can get extra amounts of damage when you're fighting bosses and such. And it also does apply enhanced effects to the robot powers, but also using more ammunition at the same time, so it gives a whole secondary fire to all of your tools in the game, which are very useful. But also something to consider is that both of these gears operate on the same meter. You can see it filling while I have one of the gears activated, and if the meter fills all the way, then you like overheat and you can't use either of the gears for a while, which might not seem like the worst penalty in the world, but it does slow you down. It hurts your efficiency because you're leaving potentially increased damage from the power gear on the table. So you want to be careful to not let that meter fill all the way, but at the same time, you want to get as much use out of it as possible, so you want to be filling that meter, but not getting too greedy with it. So you got to keep an eye on it, make sure you're using just the right amount, and also you want to be thinking about which gear you want to use, especially when you're fighting bosses. It's like, okay, you want to be in power gear most of the time to do increased damage, but if you're in dodging phases where you're not even able to land hits, then you want to disable that so you're not wasting meter. But sometimes you also find yourself in situations where you're just not prepared for what's happening, so maybe you need to slow things down to help you dodge, so you switch over to speed gear. But while you're slowing the game down, you're not doing increased damage. There is a real risk-reward there. Power gear lets you kill the thing more quickly, but speed gear ups your survivability if you make mistakes in your dodging. And if you get too greedy with power gear and fill that meter too much, you might not be able to activate speed gear and you're gonna take a hit that you could have avoided if maybe you just held off a little bit more to give yourself the speed you needed to avoid something. Like, you see all this strategic depth that I'm talking about here? Nothing like this existed in any previous Mega Man game, and it comes off of just a simple mechanic like this. I love it. I think it adds a wonderful extra layer to the Mega Man formula. Honestly, I think that this should be a permanent mechanic to this series from now on because of how much it fleshes out these systems. This is what I'm really talking about when I'm looking for evolution in Mega Man. This makes this game so much more fun than any previous entry. And this is why I say this is the best Mega Man, hands down, in my opinion, because you take this cool double gear system, you combine that with all these fantastic quality of life features, you know, the weapon wheel, you take all these really good, interesting weapons that have a lot of application, you take really great level design, really good boss design, you add it all together, and this is unquestionably the best Mega Man, if you ask me. Finally, that thing I was looking for, my Mega Man game, the one that fixed all the bullshit, didn't have any major problems, did a bunch of cool new stuff with the formula, this is it. Mega Man 11 finally did it for me. This is what I was hoping to see out of this series, and oh, it's so good. I really don't have much in the way of major criticisms for this one. Honestly, one of the biggest ones I have is I think the story is kind of stupid here. It's kind of cool that we get to see a little bit of like Dr. Light and Wily back when they were younger, but the entire thing here hinges on this double gear shit. Like, that's the focal point of the whole story. And that's kind of stupid, in my opinion. I think 9 and 10 did a much better job of having, like, stories that were not too heavy, but had a little bit of stakes and something going on that you could get invested in. But this one's just like, my double gear system will let me take over the world. And then Light's like, no, Wily, we can use the double gear system for good. That's it. That's the whole frickin' story. Like, I just think it's stupid to base the entire thing on the one new mechanic in this game instead of just come up with a good, new, compelling Mega Man story, you know? And I guess the other thing, which isn't even really a criticism, but just something I found a little bit disappointing, is I thought the final boss here was really underwhelming because it's just the same thing as every other Mega Man game where you fight Wily in a big robot, and then you fight him with just his, like, little flying machine. And I thought, like, after a billion games of the exact same thing, and this being such, like, a big, bombastic new Mega Man game, they might, like, go one step further and introduce, like, an extra big, epic final boss, and they didn't do that. It just ends like all the other ones. I'm like, oh. No biggie, because this game's real good. Like, I would say if you were only gonna play one Mega Man game, it should definitely be Mega Man 11. And I guess that kind of brings me now to my final verdict on the Mega Man series as a whole. Having now played through every single entry, what do I think of these games? Well, honestly, I am not really in love with them. I think that they are fun, I think that they are good games overall, but at the same time, there are so many problems in so many entries that they do not produce reliable fun. I can enjoy playing a Mega Man game, but there will for sure be frustrating bits. I'm gonna get annoyed, I'm gonna do stuff I don't want to do, I'm gonna run into problems that I just don't have to deal with if I play a lot of other platformers that I like, including ones from back at the same time. Like, as much as I enjoyed playing through all these games, when I stopped playing Mega Man and started playing a different platformer, I was very quickly like, man, this is so much more fun than Mega Man. And even all the problems aside, while I do find these games fun, I've never felt that they were great. I was never playing a Mega Man game and going, oh man, this game kicks ass, I'm having so much fun right now. That just never happened. 11 is the only one that got pretty close to that. And that's really the kind of thing I'm seeking in games nowadays, especially action games like this. Like, I'm looking for thrills, and I didn't really get that in these games. I got a good time, and not much more than that. And honestly, I don't really see myself revisiting Mega Man ever. I just didn't enjoy the games enough that I think I would bother to play them again. 11 is probably the only one that I would probably do a replay if I wanted to, because these games are all so similar. I really don't feel like it's necessary to play all of them. I'm just gonna play this one because it's the best one, and all the other ones are mostly the same, just not as good in my opinion. And I really struggle to recommend playing the Mega Man series these days. I mean, if you want to, for the sake of playing Mega Man and going through it and the history and how important Mega Man is to the influence of games or whatever, then sure. But if you're just looking for a good, fun game to play, there are so many indie games inspired by Mega Man that have come out over the years that I think are much better than any actual Mega Man game. Like, I would much rather play Shovel Knight or the Azure Striker Gunvolt games or Gravity Circuit. I think you'd be much better served just playing one of those if you want to play this kind of game. Or even playing Mega Man X. That is the one other Mega Man game I've played, is the original Mega Man X, and while it was a while ago, I do remember thinking that game was great in a way that I didn't think any of these classic ones were. So who knows, maybe when I get to the Mega Man X series, I'll enjoy that a lot more, though I hear some of those games get pretty bad, but we'll see, might be fun in its own kind of way. I hope you enjoyed having made it to the end of this behemoth. And before anyone even says it, it's probably already been typed in the comments, Pariah, you didn't cover all the Mega Man games. You didn't talk about Mega Man DOS. To which I say, shut up.